All right. Thank you, Madam Clerk, Deputy Clerk. All right. Welcome, everyone, to the special council meeting. This is the special council meeting here on Wednesday, January the 17th, 2024. And we have members of our staff with us. We also have a consultant who's here as part of a presentation. And we have all of our council members with the exception of our deputy mayor, who has already scheduled himself off. And we're hoping that Councillor Broderick will be still joining us here tonight. Again, this is a special council meeting, so there will be a planning public meeting as a main portion of this council meeting. Just to be advised, of course, so you all know this is a live streamed meeting, so there are opportunity for you to actually have yourself as part of our live stream if you're making a presentation. So, council, I will call for the official part of our meeting, which is the approval of the agenda. I'll read the motion, look for a mover and seconder. Recommendation be it resolved that Council of the Township of Clearview hereby approve the agenda dated January 17, 2024 as presented. Mr. MacArthur moves, seconded by Councillor Deneen. Thank you. Is there any questions? Seeing none, I'll call the motion. All in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. Are any members of council have any disclosures at this time? All right. If something comes up during the meeting, please bring it forward to the chair and we'll make sure we look after it right away for you. So for the members of the public, at this point, we now move to item number 3, which is called our public meetings. So I now declare the session is moved to public meeting format. This is a planning meeting underneath the Planning Act. Tonight, there'll be 2 separate planning meetings held. We will commence with the first planning meeting. And so I'll read the script, which will then get us underway so that we know we're in an official Planning Act planning meeting. All right. We will now initiate the public meeting portion of tonight's agenda. We invite you to comment on the applications being presented tonight and to engage in the process with us. If you wish to be notified of the decision of the Corporation of the Township of Clearview on an application being discussed this evening, please complete a public delegation form and submit it to the Deputy Clerk. Madam Deputy Clerk, they're right here, little yellow forms. She has them over there. So if you want to speak, you must fill out one of those forms. All right. The views expressed in the public comments are solely those of the individuals providing them and do not reflect the opinions of the township, its agents, or its employees. It is not possible for the township to verify the accuracy of all information provided by members of the public. The township therefore assumes no responsibility for any inaccurate information that may be contained within the public comments. If you have information that might correct, clarify, or refute any statements contained within the public comments, please forward it to the Township Planning Department. Please be advised that your comments or requests to be notified will form part of the public record. Your communication and any personal information therein will be made available to the public unless you expressly request its removal. All right. Item B is if a person or public body would otherwise have an ability to appeal the decision of the Township of Clearview to the Ontario Land Tribunal, but a person or public body does not make an oral submission at a public meeting or make written submissions before the proposed official plan or zoning bylaw amendment is adopted or passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision. Item C, if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Township of Clearview before the proposed official plan or zoning bylaw amendment is adopted or passed, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Land Tribunal, unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to add the person or public body as a party. The following public meetings will involve a brief presentation by our planning staff. We have some of our staff here, and an opportunity for the applicant or their agent to present their application, a period of public comments or questions, and an opportunity for questions by the planning committee, which are your members of council. Okay, so now we're going to move to the first public meeting. We will now begin the public meeting with respect to item 3.1 of the evening's agenda, Township of Clearview official plan update. This additional non-statutory meeting will include a presentation on the general approach being taken to address various hot topics and items of particular importance to the community. As I said earlier, we have a few of our associates here with us, Patrick Casey and Steve Weaver of the GSP group of the official plan consultants. There are township official plan consultants. We'll now start with a brief presentation concerning the application. So I would invite our applicants to come forward. They're going to have to snake their way around our waiting body of citizenry here and make their way to the microphone for their presentation. Okay, as they're doing that, I see there are still more people arriving. I just want to advise you, I see 3 seats up front here. You're welcome to come forward. Okay, I'm not sure if we can really add any more chairs. If we have to, we will. But if you'd like to come sit down, there's a seat up front. Before you gentlemen begin, I'm going to turn to Amy Can. Amy Can, would you like to, as the Director of Planning, you want to highlight what we're going to talk about here tonight?
Absolutely. Thank you, Your Worship. So the key purpose of tonight's meeting is to give council the opportunity to discuss in sort of a workshop style, the hot topics that are going to be outlined in the presentation.
Can you just bring your microphone closer? Thank you.
Can you hear me now? Good. So this will give staff and our consultants from GSP a better sense as to how to move forward in our final draft official plan, how to move forward with the final policy for these hot topics. And so after this sort of workshop style, I would suggest, if it pleases council, to move forward to solicit comments from any attending public who wish to speak. And so with that, I'm all done, and I'm happy to pass it over to our consultants, Steve Weber and Patrick Casey from GSP Group.
Okay, I think that's clear. We'll have a bit of a workshop to understand where you are in this process.
Excellent.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Measures, members of council. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good to be with you and to provide an update on your official plan process. We were last in front of council and the public in in September when we released the draft a month prior in August 2023. And since that time, we've been receiving comments on the draft official plan. The purpose of tonight's meeting is kind of twofold: to give you a bit of an update on some changes in the approach that have been considered since that, and also to, more importantly, talk about some hot topics that have been identified, seeking direction and input from council in particular as we move forward to revise the draft official plan. I do have a few slides here, and I see they're on screen, which is great. You can go to the next slide, please. So I spoke a little bit about the purpose and when the draft was released. The proposed approach, there's been a few revisions, in particular as it relates to settlement area boundary changes, and I'll speak to that. And then I will invite Patrick up to talk about some of the other hot topics that we're here to get some feedback on. Obviously, one of the key outcomes of tonight's meeting is to have that direction so that we can go back, refine and finalize the official plan, ultimately with the intent to bring it back in front of council for consideration of adoption at a future meeting date to be determined. Next slide. So there are 8 hot topics that have been identified. This is through both the themes that emerged from the public consultation and input comments that we've received to date, as well as further review with township staff. I'll speak primarily about the first one, and then obviously I'm here and available to contribute to the conversation on the other 7, but Patrick will lead us through those. You can see that they range from matters related to settlement area boundaries to some things related to how the official plan is implemented, such as through minor bylaws. We did receive comments about environmental and climate change related considerations, housing, agricultural related uses, and on-farm diversified uses was a topic of interest as well. Lot creation, short-term rentals, and antenna towers. Next slide. So this is probably one of the most significant changes in terms of the overall approach. The majority of the...
Sorry, Steve, I'd just like to interrupt you.
Yep.
There's probably 5 people out in the gallery. Is there 4 more chairs available? There's 2 more over there, 2 more up front. Come right in, fellas. And folks that are standing, there are some more chairs in here. Sorry to interrupt you, Steve.
No problem. Many of the comments we received previously, and much of the discussion and the written submissions related to either reactions to settlement area boundary changes that were proposed in the draft that was released in August, or requests for consideration of additional changes that were not proposed. And that led us into kind of taking a deeper dive on servicing related considerations and other matters with respect to settlement area boundary changes. We also reflected on the fact that it's a bit of a time in motion right now in terms of changes to the planning framework at the provincial level. There are draft changes currently out for comment from the province, including a new consolidated provincial planning statement and growth plan that would consolidate the current documents into one and change some of the rules and policies from the provincial level with respect to settlement area boundary changes. And also we had some further discussions with Simcoe County planning staff. Simcoe County is the approval authority for the township's official plan currently. The province has introduced that there will be some changes to the county in terms of their responsibilities as it relates to planning. And the county is partway through a municipal comprehensive review exercise, which also relates to settlement area boundary changes. So in consideration of all those factors, the decision or the recommendation is presented tonight to move the settlement area boundary change aspect of the official plan review to a later stage. And basically phase one, or the current part of the official plan review, would focus on policy changes. So introducing new and amended policies in the document. The mapping would still be updated with new and the latest environmental mapping information, some minor land use changes within existing settlement area boundaries, but not changing the settlement area boundaries from how they are in the current in effect official plan. That was also a timing consideration. If the settlement area boundary changes were left in the official plan, it will take more time to finalize that official plan and may even take as long as waiting for some of these provincial and county changes to come into play. So in the interest of getting good policy changes in effect, this is a quicker path forward to that outcome. The settlement area boundary changes would then come back as a further step in the process once we are more confident in what the provincial planning framework looks like at that point, and that is landed. And a more fulsome set of studies would be done to evaluate the options for that. So that's kind of the first hot topic and a bit of a summary on that. I will just add that we're confident that the current settlement area boundary configurations are not going to create any immediate short-term issues. There is land available and designated for development. There is capacity for more development. It doesn't immediately affect any applications in process. So it doesn't create any immediate issues, and ultimately is a longer-term perspective when you think about planning for growth out to the year 2051. But I will pause on this topic before we move on to the next to see if there are any questions or comments back from council on this point.
Okay, in keeping with the theme of workshop, we'll ask, first of all, if there's anybody from the public who has any questions about the settlement boundary question, about our settlement boundaries in Stayner, Creemore, New Lowell, and Ottawa are the only areas that we can make any type of adjustment to. Is there anybody with any questions or comments about that? Anything from the councillors? No? Carry on, Steve.
Okay, thank you. And the next slide is in relation to minor bylaws. And I'll turn it over to Patrick at this point to give you a bit of an overview of that. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. So throughout a number of the approaches to the different topics that we'll be discussing tonight, you're going to hear frequent reference to what's called a minor bylaw. This is a relatively new tool that's been introduced to the Planning Act within the past, I would say, 3-4 years. In those changes introduce provisions that authorize municipal council to delegate its authority to pass what are referred to as bylaws of a minor nature under Section 34 of the Planning Act, which is the section that deals with zoning bylaws. Under the Planning Act, the official plan in effect must specify the types of bylaw with regard to which delegation may be, or authority may be delegated. So the official plan has to include these enabling provisions in order for council to make use of its ability to delegate. Council, of course, is not required to delegate its authority. It may make its delegation, which may be to an individual or to a committee. It may make that delegation subject to such conditions as council feels are appropriate or advisable. And the draft official plan as it is now lists a number of matters as required under the Planning Act regarding which minor bylaws may be passed. And council has the option of choosing to delegate the authority for some of those, but not necessarily all of them. The idea is that it's a more nuanced tool in the toolbox for planning approvals. In general, the approach that we've used in the draft official plan is to use minor bylaws where something should probably be approved 95% of the time, but you want to maintain a little bit of oversight just to make sure we're not falling within the 5% where it might not be the best idea based on specific circumstances and context. The analogy I use is a little bit like a zoning consent, similar to the way lot creation consents are delegated to the Committee of Adjustment. It goes on a consent agenda before council. Because it's such a new tool, there's not a lot of examples of it in practice. But the idea is that sort of these minor bylaws would be approved by whomever the authority has been delegated to. That would then go on a sort of consent agenda to council to make sure that council members have appropriate oversight. Again, the idea being to expedite the approval of things that in most cases should be approved while maintaining a little bit of oversight for those items. So like I said, as we make mention of this a number of times in the presentation, I'd just like to make sure if there are any questions about minor bylaws or the proposed use of them, I'd be happy to.
So in a workshop session, like I said, for this one, because this is delegated authority, I'd ask the committee council members, do you have any questions about this delegated authority recommendation? Seeing nothing? Yeah, go ahead, Robert.
What section of the Planning Act did you said that?
It's section 39.2 of the Planning Act is minor. I think it's called minor bylaws.
I think that's where it is. Yeah.
Yeah. I know that's the right section number. I'm just not sure how it's glossed in the act.
If there's no members of council with a question, my quick question would be,
of course,
if we do that, would there be a requirement for the staff to advise council of a report of those minor bylaws that they passed? We should know that has happened.
Yes.
So,
as I said, because this is such a new tool, there's not a lot of examples of how it's been put into practice.
Yeah.
But I would certainly recommend, like I said, that if minor bylaws are passed, they go on to some sort of consent agenda for sort of final ratification.
Yeah, consent report from the staff.
Yeah,
once a month or something like that would be.
Yeah, like, here are the minor bylaws that were approved. Here are the minor bylaws that maybe were rejected. Just to make sure, again, that council has appropriate oversight over.
Understood.
And so that you know what everything that's happening without necessarily having to take up.
Amy, you agree with that question or that answer?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. We're more than happy to devise a reporting strategy if this ever comes to fruition, so that council is aware of any delegated approvals.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Nothing further then. Councillor Broderick, welcome. No problem. I know. That's all right. We'll let him in here. All right. Patrick, do you have something else you want to carry on with?
A couple things. Sorry.
Okay.
I'll stop trying to be funny. So yes, I guess I can move on to the hot topics then that we've clarified that particular tool. So yeah, next. So first of all, I'd like to express appreciation for just in general how thoughtful and constructive the comments we've been receiving from the public are. It's clear that residents care about their community and care about what's going on here and are engaged. So it's made our job easier knowing clearly what the community values and what priorities are set. One thing that we've heard a lot about, rightfully so, is the urgency of addressing climate change in a more fulsome manner. As you've likely heard, 2023 is officially the warmest year ever recorded, and was actually warmer than experts had even been predicting, which has alarmed a number of experts. So it's clear how incumbent upon us it is to take active steps to address the need to mitigate and adapt to climate change. Some technical terminology. When I talk about mitigation, that's sort of the accepted term for strategies that limit climate change by generally the primary way is reducing emissions, by controlling greenhouse gas levels. So carbon sequestration, capture, and storage fall under this term. And then adaptation refers to, I'm going to say adaptation again, refers to changes to be made to address climate change that's already happening that can't be avoided through mitigation. So in general, the approach that we're proposing is to incorporate expectations throughout the development approval process so that everyone proposing development in the township understands what those expectations are and is mindful of the need to mitigate and adapt from the very beginning of the process. And then without allowing for some room based on what's most appropriate in a given situation, but requiring some form of mitigation and adaptation in development applications. And then making sure that new infrastructure and new services are able to handle the increased climate-related risks from climate-related hazards. Next slide, please. So I mentioned sort of a climate lens type tool. The idea being that during pre-application consultation for development applications, people who wish to submit official plan amendment requests, zoning bylaw amendment requests, plans of subdivision, would, as part of that pre-application consultation process, be required to provide a preliminary statement looking at possible mitigation strategies to be incorporated into the proposed development, and then looking at what the climate-related risks are for that particular location, and identifying ways that the development can be made resilient by adapting to those increased risks. We then sort of propose a more fulsome mitigation and adaptation report be submitted with all full development applications, so that again, the proponent is sort of required to incorporate some sort of measure into the new development. Nope, it's gone. As I mentioned, also making sure that services and infrastructure address vulnerabilities and climate influence risks. The third point is about community improvement, allowing for the preparation of community improvement plans that specifically are made to address sustainable development and climate change related factors. I think the main point for discussion on this particular slide is the first one, the idea of requiring mitigation adaptation. And I just want to, obviously, before enshrining that in an adopted official plan, we want to make sure that that's the appropriate approach, an approach that council is comfortable taking. There are policies envisioned or proposed that would allow the township to define sort of a baseline for comparison, sort of a business as usual standard, say like this is what new development has to outperform in terms of mitigation and adaptation, so that sort of everybody's working from the same baseline. So I'll sort of open it up as a general question. Is requiring mitigation and adaptation for new development an appropriate step? Should we look at requiring adaptation and providing a little more leeway in mitigation? Me mentioning an option doesn't mean I'm endorsing it as an option. I'm just presenting it as an option. I'd be very happy to hear sort of basically before we enact a policy, I want to make sure it's a policy that council stands behind.
All right, again, in a workshop session, members of council, do you have any comments or questions in regards to the requirement for all new developments to incorporate mitigation and adaptation strategies? Robert MacArthur?
Yeah, I'm just thinking out loud. Do you know, like from the engineering aspect, then is there engineering studies happening or education to engineers how to work climate change stuff into their engineering strategies?
Yeah, I understand that there's a number of sort of standards and guidelines that are available. I know that there are some available through Infrastructure Canada, and various, like I said, guidelines and standards for the implementation of mitigation strategies. Yeah, we wouldn't be expecting developers to do this completely from scratch. The pre-application questionnaire about mitigation adaptation would ask questions like, what mitigation standards or adaptation standards will you consider in designing the development, sort of pointing them in the right direction, for items like that. That's, yeah, good question.
Okay, I'm going to go to Amy next, our Director of Planning.
Just to add to that comment, Your Worship, the Public Works and Engineering Department is currently working on a brand new engineering standard applicable to all development in the township. And so that would be a tool in our toolbox, as Patrick has said, to be able to implement some climate initiatives. And we could sort of require that through the language of the OP, if that makes sense. So that is something that township specific is in process.
Okay. Again, I'll ask any members of committee have any questions on this topic? Development, incorporating mitigating adaptation strategies. Okay. I'll open up for the floor for a minute. Is there anybody on this very topic of development standards, development, incorporate mitigation standards as part of the OP? This is a workshop session, so this is not any official presentations. We're looking just to get a feel for the audience. Yes, please. Oh, Mr. Mann, how are you? Haven't seen you over there.
Yeah, alternative energy sources would fall under mitigation because it reduces the emissions associated with generating the energy. Yes.
All right. Anybody else with any comments or questions about that? All right. Oh, hello. Oh, hi, Bob. Didn't see you here tonight. Nice to see you.
I just wondered, this sounds like we're going to leave it somewhat in the hands of developers, and that seems to me to be the wrong way. Are we not going to establish some hard guidelines that we want to see as a minimum that we want to see?
Well, Mr. Charlton, did you hear what Amy Can just said? That the engineering standards are being worked on right now, and engineering standards become hard stop issues. They must meet engineering standards. So that's the next level. We're talking here about making it part of the OP official plan, which then incorporates how pre-consultation works with developers who come to the counter, that they have to deal with that up front before having to deal with the engineering standards, which are further down in the process. Does that make sense? Amy, is that correct? Just looking for your acknowledgement, because this is still new to me too, but I'm trying to work it out.
Yes, Your Worship. I could add to that like the engineering guidelines, it could be instilled into the OP if there are other tools that the township wants to establish that may sort of require certain things of the developers to incorporate into.
A simple one would be the low flush toilet, right? I mean, that's already in the standards now, that it's preferable that we do that, but it's not a hard and fast engineering requirement, correct?
Yes. So, sorry, I was more thinking along the lines of infrastructure or site development aspects or approaches. Yeah.
It speaks to greening the facility and cooling and natural
from
cooling.
A site design perspective.
Right. Which speaks to Mr. Mann, your comments in the past about canopy. There you go. Okay. We all good? Patrick?
Yeah, no, just to, wow. just to add to what's been said, I know it sounds maybe a little bit vague the way I'm putting it here.
Yes.
Part of that's part of that's purposeful because the official plan applies to the entire township. We want to provide some room for what's appropriate to the context of development. So mitigation strategies that are appropriate in Ottawa may not work as well in New Lowell or vice versa. Which is why I'm saying it should incorporate something, but avoiding being overly prescriptive, in part to get sort of buy-in from developers to make sure that they're not constrained too much. They're aware that they have to do something, but the something is left up to what works for their specific project,
Okay.
and what makes sense based on the surroundings.
All right. Yes, I'll take another question. Comment, question, Cotton?
My understanding is you're asking council if you want this as a requirement or if it's just going to be optional. So I guess my point would be, I'd like to see it as a requirement and the council support it as a requirement.
Right. There you go. That's the kind of answer I'm looking for in a workshop session. Okay.
Great.
Again, you'll all have an opportunity to speak and make your presentations. As we heard earlier, we're in a workshop session where we're working through basically the list of tasks that these gentlemen have put together to change the OP. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, the proposed
for that.
approach leans more towards shall than should, to put it that way. And that's what we're proposing. And I just want to make sure everybody sort of agrees with that general approach.
Fair enough.
Some additional options to consider. I'd like to include sort of a statement of intent about the township preparing a climate action plan or strategy. As a statement of intent, this wouldn't necessarily be binding, but it would sort of signal a commitment on the part of township and its council. We do have proposed policies about sort of green building standards, which I believe is something that can be passed under the Municipal Act. I forget what section number, but it's in there somewhere. And then another question is, we've talked about sort of mitigation and adaptation for new development, especially larger development projects. More open-ended question is, what would be appropriate for redevelopment and intensification? Where in these cases, we want to make sure we do something to address the climate crisis, but we want to make sure that we don't discourage redevelopment and intensification from happening by making it overly prescriptive. So open-ended question is, what would be the appropriate approach to take to those sorts of proposals?
That's leaving it really open.
Yes.
Could you put the page back again? Just a second there. Whoever just, okay. Did you want to have a discussion about that?
Yes, please.
Okay. So council, member of council, have we got any comments on that section? Yes, Marty, go right ahead, Mr. Beelan.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just wondering, is the Ontario government preparing any or implementing any green building standards? I mean, there's quite a few things that constitute a green building material. And it sounds like maybe they should be pressured to build the standards there rather than municipally.
My understanding is that there's a new building code in the works that would sort of make green standards more of a minimum baseline as opposed to a nice extra. I don't have a lot of information beyond the fact that I understand that that's in the works, but I don't know a specific date. So yes, I believe so.
Amy, any comment on that? Do you know anything further?
No, Your Worship, I'm sorry. I don't know about
Yeah.
that at the provincial level.
Okay. Good question. I'm just looking for other members of council first. Is there any other members of council with any other questions? Okay. My concern is about my question is about the green building standards as well, that this should be incorporated with the engineering standards that we just spoke about. So engineering standards are going to help us with our public assets, as in sewer, water, stormwater, electricity, those type of things. But then as far as building standards that can be used on specific residential dwellings and some commercial dwellings, I'm not sure how you would apply them to industrial dwelling or industrial structures, but I'm sure that they could find a way. But the point is that I just want to make sure that we're clear that the OP could lay out standards that would change how we look at the green building envelope?
The way it's been incorporated now, it's more of a statement of intent rather than prescribing requirements at length, which is kind of getting beyond the purview of an official plan.
Right.
It would be saying like the township may establish green building standards by passing a bylaw under whichever section of the municipal act it is, or intends to pass such a bylaw, or will implement green building standards through its engineering standards, for example.
Okay.
So yeah. And then in terms of the redevelopment intensification, sort of the way I'm leaning on this one is, again, because these are things we want to encourage, maybe incorporating mitigation or adaptation with both sort of favorably disposing the township towards an application. I'm sort of in a workshop setting, I'm sort of thinking out loud right now. The idea being that if something's already built, the options are a little more constrained in terms of what can be done, but buildings can be retrofit and can certainly be adapted to meet new realities. It's making sure that requirements are reasonable for people coming in with smaller applications who aren't posing entire subdivisions, who maybe want to change the zoning on a single building for an extra use.
When I hear you say reasonable, I also think of economic. It has to be economical to make it work.
Right.
There's lots of things that you can reason to it, but if it's beyond the economic reach of, the citizens or the builder, then why is it, it has to be economical to make it work effectively to produce that. So anyway, that's just my personal take on that. Okay, good. Nothing further from members. Is there anything from the public? I did see a couple of hands. Jim, stand right up. How are you? Workshop again. Remember, this is workshop.
Just wondered if instead of green building standards, if the term green development standards would be more applicable in this case, because I think in my very limited understanding of these things, and it's happening all over
Yes.
the world, not just Ontario. There's all kinds of factors to consider: wastewater, supply of water, all of those things, but also bicycle paths, or let's say, human powered modes of transportation. In this case, EV infrastructure for charging in a community. If somebody's building a condo or a townhouse complex, where can residents charge? So it's bigger than, I think, the building. It's like looking at the whole package in terms of both potentially saving the township future costs and implications, but also potentially saving residents of those areas future costs and hazards related to climate change.
Right.
So it's kind of like a larger thing, and I think it's great that it's incorporated. This, we don't know how it works within the township. Is it part of the engineering standards, or is it adjacent to it, or how that works? But I think just that in that larger scope of looking at these bigger pictures.
Sure. All right. Thank you. Someone else? I don't recognize you. So hello, Andrew.
I can answer Councillor Belling's question about municipalities that have already completed green development building standards. City of Toronto has had it for years.
Sure. Yeah.
Very good example. Halton Hills has another excellent example. There's several municipalities that have already developed green building standards that you can use. That's a good example.
Yeah. The mayor of Halton, and I've had many talks about this very thing. So I'm aware of that for sure. Thanks for jumping in. Is there someone else? Yes.
I was just gonna say that and correct if I'm wrong, but we're not looking to have the green development standards necessarily part of we're looking for a commitment to develop the green development standards as part of the official plan. So at this stage, you're looking to put a commitment in that, because you have to hear from your staff as to what they should be and how they have to go. So at this stage of the official plan, I think it's a commitment to develop, or to a commitment to develop green development standards, not to have them in the official plan at this stage.
Right. So again, in a workshop fashion, just to be clear, the municipality's already initiated an engineering review. So that's something we're already doing. So all of these things will pile together to create the document that when you stand at the counter and you have to fill out all the information about a building permit, right? That how you get to the point where your building permit is, sign here and write your check sort of thing. You have to know what it's going to be worth based on how much you're doing versus square footage. But the building code changes to the provincial building code, changes to our engineering standards, changes to our green development standards, as Jim suggests. And so all those things will contribute to this, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say that what you're doing as council with the official plan, though, is giving the direction
Correct.
for what they are gonna put in. So by making a commitment for them to develop green development standards.
Yeah.
Then when they develop their checklist, they will know what they should be
Yeah.
considering and incorporating into.
In a traditional official plan, to be honest, and to be frank, there wouldn't be a whole lot of attention given to this topic, because a traditional plan is just land use policy discussion, right? Who wants to build what, where? But this whole business of how we build and what we build and how we use it and how it integrates into the community and the greater, subject of energy conservation and energy use in our community, that is the section that's now being suggested to be added to the OP. Okay, so let's all remember that the OP is about all of our land use planning, everything to do with, where a doghouse goes, where a factory goes, sort of thing. So those features are part of what we're doing. We're adding these potentially adding these supplemental ideas to it, which will enhance our community overall. Boy, that's a good speech, eh? Okay, back to you.
Yeah, and just add on to also in terms of the development application process, sort of laying out how these community priorities will be implemented, where these questions will come up in the process, to make sure everybody is clear about that, and to make sure that these are implemented appropriately.
Okay, moving on.
Yes. So as I'm sure we all know, housing is also another hot topic nowadays. The consultation draft of the official plan, as required by the Planning Act, provided for 3 dwelling units on a single property in the urban settlement areas, which is Stainer and Creemore, the fully serviced settlement areas. And the consultation draft provided for up to 2 dwelling units on a single parcel in the community settlement areas, which is Nottawa and New Lowell, based primarily on the lesser availability of services in those areas. The sort of proposed revision to the approach that we're taking is providing more options for the provision of extra units through, as you can see here, allowing the potential for a 4th dwelling unit on a residential property on a fully serviced parcel in Stainer or Creemore through a zoning amendment, and then proposing that we permit a 3rd unit on a residential property in a community settlement area through the passing of a minor bylaw. So as you can see on this slide, there's some options there in terms of, first of all, is the township okay with the possibility of permitting this in some situations? And then if so, what's sort of the appropriate approval mechanism for that to go forward, to make sure that these extra dwelling units are going in a place that can handle them, where the services are capable of handling the extra population, and so on. So as you can see from the multiple choice options there, I'll sort of open the 4th unit question in urban settlement areas. Should it be, again, me mentioning an option does not mean I necessarily endorse it. Should it be as of right? As of right, of course, just means no further approval under the Planning Act required. Should it be possible with a minor bylaw, with a full amendment to the zoning bylaw? So an amendment that council itself has to approve rather than delegating the approval authority? Or is this sort of a non-starter? Is this not something that should be considered? So I'll open that first question.
Okay, it's a pretty big topic. I was just motioning over to Councillor Deneen that we've talked about this before. So I'm not sure if any members of council, Phyllis, do you have a question or comment on it?
Not particularly. I'm listening more than anything, but it's important for everyone to know, and through your worship to Amy, that every subdivision that's being built now has the right to have a 2nd unit within the dwelling already. So this would up it to 3 units in every house that's being built in a subdivision and possibly 4. So that's something that we all have to think about. Thanks.
That's true. Anybody else on council would like to have comment on this discussion point? Workshop session? Okay, I'll give you one, just a point. I like the idea of us, being progressive and looking forward and saying 3 units, urban settlement area, full servicing availability, unit capacity availability. I think the other side that's missing in that realm is usually when we do a single unit or a subdivision, we always have a transportation study. I would suggest to you that a transportation study needs to be enhanced at the beginning of a development, given that you could eventually have 4, 5, 6 cars at one of these homes. And so as a result, you're going to have more cars, and where are they going to park, and how big is the driveway? And, there's like, I just don't see going over here to, one of our new streets in our new subdivision and parking 4 or 5 cars in the parking lot there because they got 3 units in the building. So I'm just saying that there's a little more to it than just thinking whether the water servicing is available. You got to think about how it impacts the entire neighborhood.
Okay, so my understanding on that is then that it's something that's more appropriate with a full zoning bylaw amendment where there are complete application requirements. The township can require a servicing report, a traffic study, any other studies and reports it feels are appropriate for the application. That's sort of the direction I'm hearing to have the option, but to provide more oversight than a minor bylaw
Right.
Provide.
So as in Councillor Deneen's pointing out that right now you can build those, you can take that house and make 3 different units, but there's been no provision given to where those vehicles go. Right.
Right.
So because it wasn't designed in it when the subdivision was built, even a simple street of 4 houses, suddenly 4 houses become 16 units, right? And then you add everybody's car. And everybody has cars or multiple bicycles, Jim. And so the point is that you need to have a place to put them all. That's what I'm suggesting to you.
Okay.
So to me, if we're going to ask a subdivision builder, developer, that they're going to meet our bylaw, that they need to do a traffic study that talks about full capacity for the whole place, which then would bring me to the point of setbacks from the curb. House has to be set back further so that there's a longer driveway, so to speak. Maybe the house has to be offset on one side so that there's access to the backyard. So many of these homes are being built literally right in the middle of the lot with 1.2 meters on either side, and you can't get a lawnmower through there, right? So anyway, that's my other issue for another time. Amy wants to speak. She's over here waving. Is that right? Or does Councillor want to go first?
I think it was me.
Okay, you go ahead.
There's also the proper way of dividing a property into like 3 units with firewalls and
Yes.
fire codes and size of the unit for the people that are living there. It's a whole different can of, yeah. Thanks.
Good point. Amy, our Director of Planning, for those that don't know.
Thank you, Your Worship. And please jump in, Patrick, if I get this wrong, but council can certainly implement either at a higher level through the official plan or into a more nitty-gritty level through the zoning bylaw. You can implement site and building regulations that apply to ARUs. For example, requiring a parking spot for each additional residential unit. Certainly fire separations and the Ontario Building Code will always apply to accessory residential units. Another site and building regulation you may wish to apply either in a future zoning bylaw or through this official plan is how big would an ARU be relative to the original dwelling? So all of these things, I'm sure there are other examples, can lend themselves to, maintaining the character of the community, but also seeing some housing built. So.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else on this topic? So are you looking for some clarity in this, the rest of this that you've inherited?
Well, I think I've got some pretty good clarity on the first 2 points there in terms of making sure there's enough oversight through something like a zoning amendment process, complete application requirements. The third point there is just The question of additional units in the rural settlement areas, which for those who haven't been spending years on this, Avening, Brentwood, Bateau, Dunedin, Duntroon, Glen Huron, Old Sunnydale, Singhampton, okay, and Sunnydale Corners are the.
Geez, you've done well. I'm going to tell you, there's staff here that don't know that, so I'm really impressed you know that.
So right now we have provision in those rural settlement areas for a second unit in the same dwelling. Obviously, these are smaller areas. Servicing is all individual private on-site services. Should we even open up the possibility of a third unit, or is that inappropriate for these locations? That's the open question.
Any thoughts, council? Third unit, residential, rural? I'll get you in a second. Just looking at council members. No? Okay, nobody has any questions on it. We'll still consider it. From the audience, please.
So I was wondering, are you talking, if they were to allow a third unit in a rural settlement area, would it have to be attached to the other two?
And that's certainly one aspect of the question is, it would more likely be detached, but the official plan can include policies that require it to be part of the main dwelling. I would say the first question is this something we even want to consider in any option, in any case? If yes, then what's the appropriate approval mechanism for it? And then what are the conditions to apply? So should it be a third unit in a separate building, a third unit in the same building? And again, from earlier discussion, the impression I get is that if this is something that we were to consider, it would be through a full zoning bylaw amendment. So I'd say, is it an option we want to consider, or is that too far given the size of these areas?
Okay. Members of council, any thoughts on that? Okay. I see someone else from the audience. Hello there. Nice to see you, Andrew.
Andrew Wright.
Yeah, how you doing?
I had a question about the rural settlement area. And we just talked a little bit about the detached ADU. So this topic is particularly sensitive to me and also my neighbors. So just a bit of a backstory here. A couple of years ago, I've got a detached ADU on my property. Been there for like 35 years. A couple years ago, I tried to renovate it to turn it into a retirement home for my mother, and was told I couldn't do it because of the zoning bylaws. I let it go. Bill 23 comes around, I'm getting kind of excited. You know, provincial government saying, okay, we need some more affordable housing solutions. I see over here, it says here, more options for accessory units. Getting really excited here. Maybe I can actually build this house for my mom to move into. That's close to family and that's affordable, because it's a lot more affordable to renovate something that's already there than to build something new. Now, reviewing the draft plan, it doesn't seem super clear to me, or there's something missing there about these rural settlement areas, especially when you're zoned residential in a rural settlement area. It doesn't seem to be any allowance, or it's not clear whether we're allowed to build a detached ADU. And it seems to be simply because we're on septic. So I'm not exactly super clear on that, or why that's even a restriction when my neighbor, who's a couple doors down the road, is zoned rural. He's on septic, he can build one. I've got some neighbors who have 12 acres of land, they're on septic, but because of the way they're zoned, even with 12 acres, they have to attach their dwelling unit to the house. It just, to me, it doesn't really make any sense. I just want a little bit of clarification on where we're going with this, and whether or not anybody in mayor or council thinks that we should have more opportunities for people in the rural settlement areas to have more affordable housing solutions for their family members and for the rest of the community.
Thank you, Andrew. It's an excellent point. Perhaps I'd like to go to the staff on this. I'm not sure. Rosalind, I think you've been aware of this issue, and Amy, can you chime in on this discussion, because it fits into this discussion right now?
Thank you, Your Worship.
Putting you on the spot, please do.
That's okay. I think the idea is we do have a choice as to whether or not an ARU is attached or detached. And certainly our consultants will have more broader Ontario examples, I'm sure. But I am aware some municipalities sort of give a choice. They say, hey, on your property, you're allowed to have a total of 3 dwelling units. But they have to be, you have to sort of make a choice. Are there going to be 2 in the detached garage, or 1 in the detached garage and 1 in the main dwelling? So just sort of differentiating through policy, what the choice is going to be. And maybe council is impartial in that regard. And so the policy could follow suit.
Right.
Or conversely, maybe you have sort of strict feelings about how that should go, and maybe they should all be attached. And so.
Rosalind, please jump in. I know you've got some experience in this, so
Yes.
that's why I mentioned you a minute ago. Thank you.
Yes, thanks. Yeah, certainly I think the distinction has to be, I think the comment was about servicing, and that is a consideration, right? Because part of what the official plan does is tries to provide consistent and fair kind of direction to everyone in the community. And so when you look at the number of units on a property, you want to make sure that if you're allowing someone in Stayner to have 3, what are the reasons you wouldn't allow someone in Nevada or in Duntruin or something like that, and the big difference there is that in Stayner, we're on municipal services, but in our rural communities, we're not. So certainly septics do limit and wells do limit, potential additional units. But it doesn't have to be that factor, right? I mean, sure, someone on 12 acres probably isn't going to have a concern with a septic and multiple wells. But that's kind of what we're here to hear about. And the other consideration is neighbors, right? So we're all accustomed to rural living here. We've been blessed to live in a community where our lots are generally quite large. And so we're having to change kind of our thinking about our neighbors and being a lot closer to one another, right? And when we add more units to lots, that's going to have to be a consideration, right? So, the other thing is, do you put in fencing? Do you put in, setbacks? Is there landscaping requirements? There's all sorts of things to accommodate multiple units, but it's those are just some of the challenges, along with the parking and the streets. And certainly in our rural settlement areas where maybe parking isn't as much an issue, but again, to be consistent and sort of fair to everyone, what is the best first step? Because we don't have to go full guns, right? Like, we don't have to go with the 4 right off the bat. But in my opinion, I think the province is saying that there's an opportunity for us to incorporate this additional units. I think, the town of Collingwood is embracing that. And, there's an opportunity. We don't have to go full guns, but maybe we take baby steps.
Okay, before you speak, Andrew, I'm just going to respond to that, and I'll let you speak in a second. Rosalind, I think there lies a little bit of a difference of opinion between what you and your colleagues do and what I do as the mayor. We're underneath enormous pressures in the province. We have growth beyond any expectations that we've ever thought of. We have more people moving to our community and more people moving to Ontario. And so some of the direction that came from the province of Ontario, whether it's, well stepped or flawed, is actually trying to help housing. And so I don't think it's time to take baby steps. I really don't. I think it's time that we actually move ahead and make some changes and do some things that can actually help people. From where I sit as the mayor, that's what I want to do. I want to be able to help people. So I think that maybe that is a difference of opinion between what the current legislation does and what we're potentially changing here in an OP, right? So I know, I'm just saying. Yeah. All right. Andrew, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to, and saying I agree with everything that Rosalind said there about having, a framework and making sure that everything's done properly when you go down that road. I just think that we shouldn't paint ourselves in the corner here where we need a official plan amendment to do this every single time. Because I think all the steps that come afterwards, such as the size of the septic system, are all dictated by the Ontario Building Code. And there's also several other bylaws that dictate some of those other things that we mentioned before. I think we can rely on those and maybe expand upon them. As long as, you know, we are committing to allowing this approach in the future, such as some of the other neighboring communities like Collingwood are doing.
Right. All right. Well, thank you. I just look to members of council since we've had a good discussion. Anybody have anything you want to add? No. Okay. Let's move on.
Okay. So, and just to wrap up that point, sort of, is it fair to characterize what I'm hearing is we'd like to consider the option, but make sure, and then provide some policy direction regarding where it might be appropriate, what factors should be considered before it's permitted, that sort of.
I think that you need to put the comment in there somewhere that a decision needs to be made, whether they separated units or they're all attached.
Okay.
And I, you know, I would prefer the first, the separated. That's my thought. But they have to be as suitable as the Rosalind pointed out, setbacks and et cetera. So.
Okay.
We're going a little slow here. Let's move along.
Okay.
You know, these people are going to fall asleep and we don't want that.
Oh my goodness,
be
yes.
sharp.
Okay, I'm sorry. Can you, I think there's an animation. We'll get the arrows up there just to. So in terms of agriculture related uses, and then after this, we'll talk about on-farm diversified uses. To clarify, agricultural related uses are primary uses of property. So in the agricultural designation, the idea behind the proposed approach is we want to maintain as much land in agricultural productivity as possible. So we have some agricultural related uses that might be permitted with a minor bylaw. And then the uses that you don't see specifically listed there would require a full zoning amendment. I should say this is in prime agricultural areas, so that's why it's a bit more restrictive than it would be in the rural designation. Again, the goal being to minimize the amount of land removed from productivity. So the question on this topic is, in terms of the specific uses you see there, are any of those more appropriate as of right? Are there uses you don't see that maybe you'd like to see with a minor bylaw? Are there uses that you think require more oversight and should require a full amendment? That's the question on this slide.
Members of council, any questions on this very important topic? Council? No, seeing none, I'll hold mine for later. I'm expecting some calls here from the public on this one. Workshop session. Any thoughts on the proposals about agricultural related uses? Yes, please come forward or stand up. There you are. Hello, sir.
Hi, my name is Brent Preston. I just had a question. Are you also going to be talking about on-farm diversified uses? Okay.
Yeah, separate from this. Because these are uses where it would be primary. So instead of a farm, it's a flour mill, or instead of a farm, it's a value retaining facility, rather than being on farm.
Good point. Thank you, Brent. There is a good distinction between the two. So this one is specifically about using agricultural lands for those type of services as of right. No questions? There you go. I think it's an excellent idea, to be quite honest. And I think that's the type of thing that should be in our official plan. So
sorry, to make sure I understand it, sort of moving more of these towards the as of right side of things, or at this sort of balance?
I think that those services should be in the agricultural related uses right now.
Okay.
For sure.
Okay.
But that's just me.
Okay. And then this is just the same question, but in the rural designation where lands aren't technically prime agricultural lands, there may still be farming operations. But the proposed approach we've been taking here is to permit more agricultural related uses because the land is less agriculturally productive. So it's sort of a more appropriate location for things that support farming, but that aren't farms themselves. So again, similar question, is this an appropriate balance? Are there uses that you'd like to see restricted more, restricted less?
Members of council, any thoughts? No. Nothing? Members of the public, any thoughts on that? This workshop? All right, carry on.
Okay. Yeah, that's just. So now we're at the on-farm diversified uses. And the distinction here, as I suggested earlier, is that these are secondary to the main use of the property, and the main use of the property would be agricultural. An on-farm diversified use is meant to be small in terms, small and supportive. So it doesn't take up a whole lot of area. It supports the main agricultural use, perhaps by providing an additional source of income. The zoning bylaw would establish provisions such as maximum lot coverage, either in terms of an area or in terms of percentage. I think the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, OMAF, Farms and Rural Affairs, recommends about 2% of total lot area. And then as you can see, we've got sort of the three different levels, certain uses permitted as of right, others permitted with a minor bylaw, and then some requiring a full zoning bylaw amendment, again, based on considerations like compatibility with agricultural operations, what's appropriate for the area, outside of settlement areas, and so on. So again, similar question. Does this seem like it strikes an appropriate balance? Are there uses that people feel strongly about that they'd like to see swapped, that they'd like to see as of right, or that they'd like to see maybe provided with more oversight?
Any members of council on that topic? Yes, Robert McCarthy, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just going through your list here and I'm kind of thinking the production of value-added products should be a farm value-added product should be as of right.
Okay.
As compared to needing a bylaw to change that.
Okay. Excellent. Any other members? I'm good. Nothing further? I have a question, and that is regards to the whole idea of the microbrewery, micro distillery, small scale winery, cidery, and so on. These are, a few years ago, these were hugely popular. Everybody wanted to have one. There's been an awful lot of pushback from members of the public about their, as Rosalind pointed out, how close they are to neighbors, right? Some of these need to be associated with special events and wedding parties and so on that happen. So we need to be cautious about how that goes. And I'm wondering if that's a minor bylaw or that should be a full zoning bylaw application rather than just a minor bylaw. I think it should go into the full bylaw because I think it demands that the public have access to comment on that type of activity popping up in the rural areas. That's sort of my thought on that. So I think you need to have the public input on that one. But, all the other things that are in there for minor bylaws, I think it makes total sense.
Okay.
Anybody else? Council? Yes. Deneen, go ahead.
I think there's maybe a few more for the rural that should be more of a zoning bylaw, a major zoning bylaw, like machine repair shop, stuff like that. Again, you mentioned neighbors.
Yes.
And kennels. There are a few there that wouldn't bother a neighbor possibly, but we have to be careful in the rural areas with what we put next to a neighbor.
Yeah. Well, I would suggest actually, Councillor Deneen, that there's pretty well every farm is someplace where they fix something. So there's always a drive shed to fix something. Yeah, I know. An agricultural use, on-farm diversified use that has an actual machine shop, repair shop versus just a shop that fixes a tire. I get it. Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Pat.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. And just again, to clarify that we're talking about secondary supportive uses that are limited in terms of the amount of area they use up. And then the uses would still be subject potentially to things like site plan control to ensure that things like separation from surrounding properties is taken into account. I do take the point, however.
Yeah, time of operation and that kind of thing, right? Fits into our noise bylaw too.
Yeah.
Okay, any members of the public have any comments about the on-farm diversified uses? Brent, you want to jump up again since you started that?
So a quick question. if these sorts of things, if they were approved through a minor bylaw, could that bylaw be appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal?
My understanding is that a minor bylaw, as a bylaw under Section 34 of the Planning Act, would be subject to the same appeals process. Yes.
Okay. So Clearview has been a pioneer in terms of allowing farmers to do diversified uses, to diversify their income streams. We've been ahead of the province and ahead of the county for a long time. And I think that pretty much everything that to the right of as of right should be in the as of right. As you explained, you can use site plan control, noise bylaws. There's lots of ways to ensure that that these activities don't disturb their neighbors. But as long as they can be appealed or having to go through a zoning bylaw amendment process, then people aren't going to do it because you don't have certainty. It can be extremely expensive to defend an appeal. When it's as of right, everyone knows what they can do, and we can go ahead and do the things that we need to do to make money and keep our farms viable. So I think wherever possible, make it as of right. It just makes everything simpler. It streamlines the process, and it makes it everyone knows what they can and can't do, and you can use other mechanisms to ensure that it's not something that's going to disturb the neighbors' problems. Like the machine repair shop, our former mayor has a repair shop on his farm. That's a huge asset to the community that everybody uses. That's really, really important. And we need more of those types of things, not less. One quick thing, Mr. Mayor, just to point out that I pointed out to the planning department that some of these uses appear on more than one list in the draft official plan. Some of them are listed as things you can do as of right and things that require minor variance or zoning bylaws. So that's a little bit.
All right, I'm going to clean that up a little bit, I'm sure. All right, thank you for those comments, and you're bang on. I think I saw Jim put his hand up. Go ahead, Jim, if there's anybody else.
Just wanted to commend you in mentioning the wedding aspect and things like that.
Yeah.
It's come up. I had a client once, this was not in Clearview, but they were proposing a winery, distillery, all kinds of things. It was all a smoke screen to have a wedding venue.
Right.
Really. And I think that's something that I removed myself from because I didn't like where they were going. But I think that's the type of thing to be very wary of, and hopefully somehow within what you guys do, you can make sure that that's under control of this type of thing.
For sure. And to that point about that I was making was that it's not just the wedding aspect. It's also like a microbrewery, distillery, even a small scale winery. There's a lot of effluent that comes out of a facility like that. And so that has to be managed and handled correctly, whether it be dispersed upon the soils. You don't want to saturate the soil too much with that. So you've got to deal with that aspect of that type of work. And so to me, you got to bring it in. The person needs to come to the counter, tell us what they want to do, go through the minor bylaw amendment process. And if the staff feel that it needs to be elevated, then they can bring it to council's attention right away. Right. So that's where I'm looking at it. That's why I think it absolutely should be over in the bylaw section, over in more to bylaw. Further on that, Jim?
Say, yeah, like at some point, the definition, I'm sure would be done. What is micro and what is small?
Right. Yeah. Well, we're workshopping right now, trying to sort that out. Anybody else with any comments on the whole on-farm diversified use question and some of the things that are on your screen? All right. Seeing none, we'll carry on.
Okay. And just to speak to the point about wedding venues, that's the event venues on the very far right. And the draft does incorporate very specific policies to requiring sort of development agreements about hours of operation, site to and from the traffic, being very mindful of the impact that those have had and continue to have on the community. So
thank you.
I like my question marks. Okay. I think rather than break the next few slides sort of break down this list one by one, I think maybe in the interest of time, we won't do that. So the proposed approach to the creation of a new lot for a farm dwelling that's been rendered surplus because of a farm consolidation is sort of one of the only situations in which the creation of a new residential lot is permitted in the agricultural designation, sort of to be consistent with provincial policy. The criteria that are proposed in the draft official plan are, first of all, the owner of the lands that are being consolidated has to have owned or operated another farm for at least 5 years. The rationale being we want to make sure that that the lands remain productive, that they'll be in good stewardship, and sort of to establish the bona fides of the operation. The dwelling that's being severed is at least 15 years old. There's a limitation on the size of the lot created, although we provide some leeway for things like where you want to conserve a cultural heritage feature, or where there's an important natural heritage feature that should go with the dwelling. The lot retained has to be large enough to actually function as a farm unit within the consolidated farm. And then the last point there is we have the statement about there being the farmlands being consolidated, being within a reasonable distance. And I have that in quotation marks because the approach we're taking doesn't apply a specific numerical standard to the term reasonable distance. It sort of is defined as a distance that allows for the effective operation of the consolidated lands as a single agricultural operation. It's up to the decision-making authority to decide if the distance is reasonable given the merits of the particular case. It's just both properties must be within Clearview. So as a general question, do these seem like appropriate criteria? Are there sort of more appropriate ones that would achieve the goals more effectively? I'll open it up for comments here.
All right, members of council, do you have any questions or comments on this idea of the surplus dwelling and lot creation? Yes, Phyllis Deneen, go ahead.
Through your worship to Amy, this is basically what we've been doing, but with official plan amendment, right? So this is nothing really new to us except for the fact it's going to be official now.
Thank you, Councillor Deneen, through you, your worship. So this is similar to what we're doing now. There is a numeric value currently for reasonable distance, which is what you've seen through official plan amendments a couple of times over the last year or so. So that is probably the biggest change around surplus dwelling lot creation.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Beelan, Councillor Beelan.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just a little bit confused too when it says it has to be small enough to limited in size and then large enough to function as a farm unit. Do we need to define that better?
So the lot with the dwelling needs to be limited in size to minimize the amount being removed from the farm part of the property. And then what's left to be consolidated as part of the agricultural operation needs to be large enough that it can work as a farm. So it's sort of talking about the two lots after the severance has taken place. And sorry, limited in size. Yes, it does. The draft official plan does establish sort of a 1 hectare benchmark. Again, like I said, with some leeway given for special considerations and special cases.
Hey, Councillor. Yep, thank you. Any other members? Yes, go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, I just like to comment and agree with the reasonable distance aspect rather than a hard value because it's pretty appropriate, obvious that farm values are becoming wider spread and farmers are willing to and can with the machines travel further distances. So
yeah,
I'm quite comfortable with the change in that.
All right, thank you for that. I'll just give one comment. I think it's clear that as Councillor Deneen pointed out, we're already doing a lot of this now. It must be very clear that the lot that's being created, limited in size, yes, but also limited in the fact that it can't have livestock on it. So someone could use those properties to have a garden, et cetera, and do that type of localized farming, but you can't have livestock unless you have the nutrient that you need in a livestock operation. And so that's, I believe, already associated with our current policy. Is that correct? Yeah. So it's already in our policy. So that's good. I just want to make that clear. And the second thing is the business about reasonable distance. There are other areas of the province of Ontario that allow this type of thing to happen, and they consider it countywide if they're in the entire county. Bruce County, you could be in the entire Bruce County, have a farm at one end, farm at the other, and consolidate them in the county. So I think this is a good step for us to say here in the township, and we'll see where it goes from there. Thank you.
And sorry, because I always do this, to clarify that one point, there is a policy explaining that the leeway mentioned doesn't include a larger lot for the purpose of avoiding minimum distance separation formula through livestock. Yeah.
But it also has to do with farming. You know, unfortunately, some people want to buy these little houses and bring their horse there. You can't do that. Like, you just can't. Anyways, that's good. Is there anybody from the public who wants to comment in this workshop session in regards to this? Yes, sure. How you doing, Bart? Yes.
It was defined as 2 kilometers, I think, originally. Is there a new actual distance where you can just say concert wide?
We did an amendment and a special case to go beyond 2 kilometers about a year ago, staff. I think it was about that. So we did have a special case to go beyond the 2 meters because it was a good argument, but
it's not being limited to 2 kilometers.
No, it's going to inside Clearview Township.
Yeah, this one. Yep.
Can we discuss this at great length? So if I farm on the strong little road, I can come all the way across the 10th session, we get farm consolidation, but I can't go across the road.
That's right now how it would be, unless we get an agreement with Springwater and or the county of Simcoe to permit it, right? But that also speaks, Bart, to what Robert was talking about the distance of the equipment traveling to service those farms, right? So it's a tough one. That's why we're having this workshop discussion. Thank you. Anybody else with any other comments on the lot creation? Okay, let's move on.
Okay. Yeah. Yep. Thank you. Yes, please. Yeah. Okay, so based on what we've heard from council so far, the proposed approach is not to permit short-term rental accommodations, which is we know what it is. So that's the proposed approach right now. Small scale accommodations. So we're talking about actual commercial accommodations that are a commercial use are permitted in the commercial designation. And then we have some proposed policies to look at where those might be permitted also outside of settlement areas. So the first question for this slide is, are we good with the proposed approach for short-term rental?
Members of council? I'll just say it. I think that we should have short-term rentals. I think we should be allowing, the B&B companies to do that. But I think they need to be licensed clearly to operate. And we don't have a licensing structure right now, so they're currently prohibited. But I think they need to, I think that business thrives in our community right now in the bootleg area, I suppose. Whereas it'd be my thought that, we as a council and with the staff should be able to come up with a licensing format to permit short-term accommodations in our community, where those that are staying in those facilities know that they're safe because our community has inspected them and made sure that they're fire safe, et cetera. So that's my thought on it. I know there's been a lot of talk about it, but we've never passed a resolution to that matter yet at this table. Does anybody from the public have any comments on short-term accommodation? Yes.
By coincidence, I was actually researching this today on Halifax short-term rental.
Oh, okay.
For a subdivision I managed out there. And they have restrictions. So first, there's two different types of short-term rental. It can be the whole accommodation or it can be by room.
Right.
And so they define them both. And then for short-term, it has to be principal dwelling. So you can rent your house if it's your principal dwelling and you're doing a timeshare or a house exchange, or you're just on vacation, so you're renting for those couple of weeks. But where we've had problems in the subdivision I'm looking after is that people are buying it as investment properties and they have no commitment to the neighborhood, and they're just trying to make money off it, and they're just renting them. And you don't want that.
No.
So if you try to put it in, so it has to be principal dwelling, and if it's rooms, you actually have to be there if you're renting the room. And then what you're talking about for transportation, that all hits into it. So if you're
Yep.
starting to rent rooms in your place, well, then you can have multiple vehicles. So you have to address that as well. And that's all addressed in HRM, but we put a new bylaw out in September to do all that. I don't know if it should be part of the official plan, but they do it through their bylaws. But yeah, there's just a lot of things that should be done, because it might benefit some people, but the neighbors sure don't get benefit from it. So
I understand. In my time as mayor, I've had many phone calls about this very issue from neighbors complaining about that very point. So thank you. Anybody else from the public have any questions or, oh, I'm sorry, Marty's up first. Go ahead, Mr. Beelan.
Thank you. I want to thank that gentleman because I thought there's nothing wrong with snowbirds renting their house out. But yeah, we have to define it as principal residence, and I like that point.
Yeah, me too. Members of the public, anybody else with any? Yes, there's a hand there. It's Jim. Hi, Jim.
Like to reinforce what Alan said, but that we have a housing crisis
Yes.
for our residents, and the commodification of houses as a business really has to be restricted. I think, as you say, the B&B is a very different thing than just a B in a way, right? And enhancing bed and breakfasts where residents are present by some means, I think it would be a great thing for our community, because there is a huge demand for visitors, and we don't have a hotel system, as we all know. So to do that, but also being a neighbor of buildings on either side that have encountered short-term rentals. It can be fine, and it can be very unpleasant.
Yes.
When there's, a rave with 300 people at 4 o'clock in the morning, and the owner is on vacation. So I think it's definitely something that has to be very careful.
Yep.
Yeah. And to clarify, we do distinguish between short-term rentals and bed and breakfast where the owner is present and provides meal as part of the rental service. So there is that distinction.
Yep. Anybody else with any other comments on short-term accommodations? Okay. I'm surprised I didn't hear more, be honest, with the number of phone calls that I get as the mayor. So carry on.
So moving then to small scale accommodations. The term small scale meaning sort of up to 5 or 6 guest rooms as a commercial accommodation. So a mini sort of boutique hotel kind of idea. In the rural designation, so outside of settlement areas where they're permitted as commercial use, looking at sort of permitting these in the rural designation, as you can see, a non-agricultural commercial use with a zoning bylaw amendment. And again, to make sure that factors like neighboring uses, ability to handle that many people on a property, traffic, et cetera, are given proper oversight. So that you can see some of the options there with the proposed option highlighted.
Council? Goes through the zoning bylaw procedure, I think, is the way to go with that one. It allows, again, for the neighbors to have their day to speak and bring forward their recommendations. Anything else? Members of the public, any questions? Any recommendations? No? Okay. Oh, yes, there is. Please jump up. The zoning bylaw, yes. There you go. All right.
Similar question for the agricultural designation. Again, we have it permitted as a non-farm diversified use. So it'll be subject to things like coverage standards, up to whatever, like a small percentage of the lot. The main use must be agricultural. And again, through a zoning bylaw amendment is sort of the proposed approach for this one. So.
Okay,
What a question.
moving right along.
All right. And then finally, let's talk a little bit about antenna towers, which we've heard a couple of things about. The revisions that we've been making to the public consultation draft provide more in the way of locational criteria. Allows for the zoning bylaw to identify what are referred to as community sensitive locations. And then we've included policies about a visual impact assessment as part of an application, including a digital visibility map, which is something that the Niagara Escarpment Commission sort of incorporates into their application process for this. If actually not quite yet. And you can see the preferred locations, locational criteria we're referring to sort of maximizes the distance from residential areas, minimizes impacts on, again, important view corridors, and then avoids impacts on sensitive features and areas. And then just as an example of what a digital visibility map looks like, this is taken from the Niagara Escarpment Commission's Visual Impact Guide. And basically what it does is it shows the location of the proposed tower, and it shows in green where that tower will be visible from, and anything that's not green is where it won't be visible from. So it helps the community get a sense of what's actually being proposed and what the visual impact would be.
Members of council, any questions on that? Okay, any comments? You got a comment? Yes, go ahead.
That's all we can regulate as far as the towers go anyway.
Yeah.
We can't do anything more than that. We have no regulatory anything to do with it other than that part of it.
Yeah. Anybody else? Okay. Could I, go ahead, please.
Yeah,
Actually, go back one frame too. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just wondering in the whole, as technology changes and whatnot, whether there's provisions in the application process that if and when the tower becomes not necessary anymore, that there is a cleanup cost involved or removal cost involved in all that.
Mm-hmm. From my experience, if you don't mind sharing, is that the transmission towers of the past, the giant microwave towers that you'd see quite tall with a big dish on the top, those often had provisions in them for removal because they were part of transmission linking. When the transmission stopped, they were moved to a different location. They had a responsibility to remove them. Communications towers, however, which currently are the radio type towers with the cell phone and internet business, they'll be around as technology changes because the antenna structures can be removed and new structures go on the tower. So I think there's a bit of a trade-off there. Nevertheless, sorry, that's just my inside info. Anybody got any information or any comments about the antenna towers? Antenna tower structures? Comment? Okay. I will say your comment there, or you say criteria for preferred location, maximize distance from residential areas. That is completely opposite to the business plan for all of the cell phone providers. Okay. That is an absolute opposite direction because the cell phone providers want to be as close to where the residential areas are as they can, because the signals need to get to where the people are. So if you maximize the distance from a residential area, like putting it in the next county, it doesn't work. So I'm just telling you that from the business point of view and the engineering for radio transmissions, it's the other way around. Understand, Pat?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah. And yeah, these were developed with reference to various suggestions, but again, this is why we're doing this.
Yeah. Well, and the thing about the sightline, your other drawing there from the Niagara Escarpment Commission example, the issue there for that one is that the propagation, as in the actual electronic radio signal getting out from those towers, has a similar kind of pattern if you actually saw a propagation map. It's opposite though to that because you get excellent signal, really good quality signal the closer you are to the tower, and any geographic things that are in the way starts to dissipate the signal. That's why it breaks down. So that's a great one for visual reference, but it serves the opposite for how you actually get the signal to the customers who want and need the service. Kind of fun, isn't it?
Yeah.
I thank goodness that the federal government make these decisions, not us.
Yeah. And in recognition of Councillor Deneen's point through you, Mr. Mayor, it's very limited what what authority at the municipal level there is for these. The idea is to provide the community with an idea of what's being proposed and a clear sense of what the impacts will be.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's, so thank you very much for your time, and for the discussion on all of these points. It's been very helpful. Thank you for your patience as well. And, if there are any final questions for myself or Steve, we'll be happy to address them.
I think we're good. Steve, do you got any final comments or?
I just want to echo Patrick's gratitude for everybody's patience and input. A lot of really great insights tonight. A lot of local knowledge that we're drawing on, which is always great in an official plan. We want this to be a made in Clearview official plan, and having these discussions really helps that along. So if there's one item I can kind of point out, that if there was any lack of clarity tonight, if it wasn't clear what the final direction was on some of these hot topics, that's okay. We will work with your staff. We'll come back with what we would recommend based on the discussion tonight, as well as continuing to review that item. And then we'll make sure those items are highlighted with a clear, this is what was being recommended in the final OP when it comes back. So that's clear to everybody.
Right.
And that would be kind of our next step, is all of the input we've received both tonight as well as leading up to tonight is going to be summarized in some reporting, some documents, along with an updated draft official plan. I think the notice indicates this Friday for the updated draft official plan. Based on the discussion tonight, I think that's going to take a little bit longer to digest some of the input and react to it and make sure we come up with a well thought out final document. That will come back then with some recommendations for council to consider. And that will be an open meeting to the public as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Amy, do you have anything you want to conclude with before you go to questions or comments?
Nothing further, Your Worship. Thanks to everyone
Okay.
and to council for coming.
Great.
It's been great.
All right.
Appreciate it.
So Steve and Patrick want to relinquish the podium. You guys can have a seat over here and you can be of assistance to the public if you have to answer any questions. And so the podium is now going to be available for the public. So council, and for the public, does anyone in the audience wish to make a comment, ask a question, or address the committee with respect to the OP application, the official plan process? Questions may be directed or responded to by the applicant and their agent or staff, but should be addressed through the chair, which is me. Please remember to complete and submit your delegation form. And the floor is now open to the podium for anybody to make presentations. Please come forward. You got your hand up. Come on up. Bill. Please come to, no, this is the section where you got to go up here, because this is the official portion where you need to, we're no longer in the workshop. So I want to hear directly what you have to say. Everybody at the podium, please. Don't rush. Thank you.
I'd like to suggest a couple of additions to the official plan, if you're willing to consider them. I think the strength of the plan as we now see it is very heavily supported by the amount of public participation you've been able to use throughout this process. And I think the quality of it reflects that. And it took courage on John's part and the team that put it together to undertake this. And I think it's a real benefit in the plan. My suggestion would be to put into the official plan a commitment that at every time there's either a planning or an execution component related to the official plan, one of the major issues we've just gone through, that the person on staff be asked to consider, is there a way that we can use public input in a way that will make the execution or the planning better or stronger? The second point is in some ways even more important. Look at the folks that are here and folks online. You've generated some real excitement, some real interest in an area that can be really boring when it comes to the political process. You put energy into this, here it is. So my suggestion is one of the ways you keep documents alive and strategies alive is to communicate back to the people who helped create them. I would suggest that at least on an annual basis, on each of the items you have in your plan, it might be a long document, but that's all right. In the past, I think the tendency of political jurisdictions is to say, if they're interested, they will come. I think it's much more important to say, you were interested, we will come to you with an annual report or a quarterly report or whatever you feel is best. You have put too much energy into this to let them molder. We have put too much energy into this to let them molder. And if the annual report generates more discussion, all the more grist for your planning mill. And I would suggest, if you're willing, to put those in some written form into the official plan.
Okay, thank you so much. I'll just give you a quick comment. The strategic plan speaks very highly of communication, and so that is certainly something we're going to be taking a look at from a corporate point of view from the strategic plan. So thank you. Other persons who wish to speak, I see a hand. I see Bart, please come forward. After that will be, is that Jim? You're kind of hiding on me there. There you are.
Yeah, sorry, Your Worship. I'm just not sure if I might have missed something in the onset.
Sure.
I have made written submissions to Rosalind and Amy with regards to a couple sections of the OP. But I thought I heard you say something that if you didn't get up and speak publicly, that you may lose your right to be part of an appeal down the road.
Well, that is in the official script. And again, always the right to appeal is up to the hearing officer at an OLT, right? If it does go to an appeal. So go ahead, Madam Clerk. You know this better than I as far as the script.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I might push it over to our Director of Planning as well. If you provide written comments to the planners as well as comments orally here during the public meeting, that both gives you the option for appeals. So
that's all your time I need. Thanks.
There you go. So you've submitted written documents as well as standing here tonight and asking that question has qualified you. How's that? Okay, Jim, you're up next. Is there other persons who wish to speak on these issues? This is only the first time I'm calling. We'll go through first, second, and third. This is still in the first round. Go ahead, Jim.
Thank you, Your Worship. My name is Jim Campbell from Duntroon. Mayor Measures, members of council and staff, on behalf of the members of the very dedicated people of the Clearview Sustainability Network, we want to thank you first for the opportunity to comment on the proposed official plan. And we wish to commend Mr. Casey and Mr. Weaver for incorporating climate-based proposed approaches, as well as some climate-based proposed options to the current draft OP. We respectfully request that council ensure that the following key commitments are included within the final document. Please. One, the utilization of a climate lens in all municipal decision-making. Number two, an objective to reduce Clearview's greenhouse gas emissions. Number three, the development and implementation of green development standards for our township. And four, a commitment to the creation of a climate action plan. The Clearview Sustainable Network wishes to offer our support to council and staff in whatever way we can as members of this community to advance these very important initiatives. And we also wish to thank you for Monday night unanimously approving the creation of a Climate Action Advisory Committee, which is wonderful news for the community. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Jim. Is there someone else? I didn't see that. Did I catch anybody else's hand? Yes, come right forward. Hello again.
Good evening. I'm Matt Plain, the owner of AutoSolve.
Yes.
I'm here today to discuss my concerns with the negative effects that some of the proposed changes in property designations will have on our business and our livelihood. We run AutoSolve, an auto repair and towing business from 102 and 104 Edward Street East, which is part of a broader industrial area on Edward Street. This area is 10 acres in total and lies between Edward Street East and Elizabeth Street, south of the Tribute Homes subdivision, east of the Bricks condos, and our property neighbors the Simcoe County Public Works building. Despite my active involvement in the planning process, including meetings with planning directors, participation in the 2019 meeting, and numerous written correspondences, my concerns and questions remain unanswered. As we near the deadline for the Friday final draft, I've yet to see these concerns addressed. This situation presents a glaring contradiction. The new official plan, which is supposed to align with the provincial policy statement, the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, and other planning guides, emphasize the importance of protecting industrial and employment zones. Yet the proposed changes will directly undermine this principle, which only deepens my confusion about why this change is being considered in the first place. I've seen how much work have gone into this over the past 4 years, and with everything that's been discussed tonight, I'm wondering how all the feedback we give today can be added to the final plan in just 2 days. Can you explain how you'll make sure our comments today are really looked at and used in the final vision? And let me know when I might get a response on all the questions and things I've submitted. I haven't heard it, 4 emails since November, and I haven't got a response. I understand they're busy, but hearing the final draft is coming, I don't quite know what that means. If there's another opportunity that we'll have to speak on it after we see what's in there.
Okay, so I'll tell you what, I'm going to let Amy answer a couple of questions here in a minute, but I'll make a quick comment for you. This is the public meeting process of the OP. As we explained right at the beginning, sorry, that was better, just shy of 2 hours ago. And that is that this is a non-requirement of us to do this. We're doing this because we want to hear from you. We want to make sure that this official plan is, as Steve said, I think you said it, made in Clearview plan. That's why we're doing this. So yes, we're glad that you're here. Sorry it's taking so long, but we are going to hear you. And yes, you're being recorded and part of this right now. Please fill out that yellow form so that we know for sure that you're here. Got it?
Yeah.
Now, as far as your questions about your specific site,
yes,
I'll turn to Amy and Roz and to Nick and all others who are on this team. Can you give us a comment about that, about the apparently not getting his answers?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for coming out, Matt. We're well aware of Matt's situation, and we appreciate his commentary. We've actually been sort of working behind the scenes on a site-specific basis to investigate and see how we can't sort of come to a bit of a win-win situation relative to the future development of this pocket of Creemore, and appreciating the history of the way that this property in particular has been used. So our apologies for not sort of meeting in person, but we assure you we've been working specifically on this issue behind the scenes. So
there you go.
That's the same answer I got last August.
Yeah. I can't tell you anything more because I don't know what they're doing, right? They're working behind the scenes.
That's what I'm looking for, is just some clarity in what's happening. I don't want to keep sending emails asking the same questions, but I don't get any answers and don't know what's happening yet. We're looking at a final draft on Friday. So maybe can you explain what the final draft means? Like once I read that, and is there opportunity to change it after that point? Or if you have a recommendation, there must be something you can share.
Amy or John, I think you could, first of all, outline what's going to happen here. We're going to obviously take all this information and what's going to happen.
Thank you again, Your Worship. So we are going to take the information that we've received tonight, as well as the most recent comments that we've received over the last couple of weeks, because they are still trickling in. And we're going to take those and put them into the final draft official plan. As Steve noted, it'll likely take us a little bit longer than Friday. Again, we've received more new commentary, so we're going to be working on that. Yeah. Was there another component of the?
John, did you want to add anything on that, or?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to help clarify, is that a lot of people will be submitting comments, and you have a comment that is respecting your desire in your own property. Other people may be commenting on your property and we haven't received it. We typically don't respond. We receive the comments, we wait for all comments to come in. And then if there's any issues that arise, it all gets presented to council. So those comments are captured
but they typically don't want to get into a dialogue to give you any false information prior to other comments coming in and the council hearing it here. That's mainly the reason why. That's all. But I do know they're aware. As a matter of fact, I remember meeting with you here as well.
Mhm.
And we asked you to be patient. We know that you have your comments in, and Amy's clarified that today. So just, if you haven't heard from us, don't worry. We're still in the process. But we can't really go out and start negotiating with you before the process is finalized, because that's not, we can't give you favorable treatment over somebody else that may have an opposing opinion to your situation. We have to treat everybody the same. So that's why, if that helps clarify.
So again, the final draft, then that it's not final, or will that address all of the questions that are in there? I mean, I'm really just looking for justification on how it's happening. I mean, if other people are complaining that they don't want to see me there, that would make sense. That would be, sorry, it wouldn't make sense, but at least there would be some reasoning behind it. I'm just, everything I read tells me it shouldn't happen. I mean, the provincial policy statement and they all talk about protecting employment lands, and Clearview talks about protecting employment lands and industrial property and the value of it. So if we're moving forward with the change, will there be a reason given, like an explanation of, why we're going against these policies, to say this needs to change because X or Y? Or if you can't give it to me right now, I understand, but
We're getting into hypotheticals. That's the problem, in the sense that there could be no issues or there could be issues, but we haven't finished the process as of yet. They have to go through and double check everything as it relates to your comments. Are there other conditions that come into play? Is there other legislation? They have to weigh that against your comments, but they can't give you that feedback yet. Other people may be commenting in opposition to what you're requesting, and I'm not sure if they are or not, but I'm just saying that's a possibility. So that's why we treat everybody. We have to treat everybody the same. It's a requirement.
right.
And that's why we can't just go and come back to you on specific comments you made when we haven't finished the process yet.
But even the feedback that we got tonight about other hot topic issues, I mean, there was information about the direction that we're going, and I don't understand why the same couldn't be done for the designation changes.
And that's a fair game.
Consider it brought up. Designation changes is certainly a point that needs to be addressed, right?
So, I mean, I have all kinds of questions I want to ask. I don't want to take the whole meeting asking them. Will I get a response if I submit questions?
I sure hope so.
Because, if I send another email with a bunch of questions,
yeah. Matt, we've met many times. We've had great conversations with you. The staff obviously have too. I'm old enough to know that we had quite a debate about your property with lots of public support for your property. And so I think it's well stated. We know what's going on with that, and it does need to be addressed, given the entire neighborhood around your property. With that, did you participate in that stormwater management PIC that was there? I mean, it was a lot of information there. Your property is sort of right in that area where that water is going to be, right? So there's a lot of things playing, around you. So to speak to your specifics, you need to work directly with the staff and ask if they can give you some answers. And as the CIO just said, we can't give you answers about the official plan review until we've completed the official plan review, right? We have to give you, that we're working on it, that your comments have been heard, and the staff are going to prepare a document that's then going to appear at council. Once it gets presented to council, come on back if you got a concern. See what I'm saying?
Yep.
The other good news is you're on the podium. And so in the end, you'll have a right to appeal if you need to.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Are there others? Oh, hello. Hello, Reverend. Nice to see you.
Honorable Mayor, councilors, staff. I just didn't want to miss this opportunity. Jennifer Irving, president of the Clearview Ministerial, to raise again on behalf of the Clearview Ministerial our concern for creating, supporting supporting affordable housing and attainable housing. We would like to see barriers and red tape removed wherever possible in the official plan so the vulnerable can be housed and our community strengthened. Where there is space for all, there is healthy community.
That's as simple as that. Thank you very much for doing that. Did you fill out one of those yellow forms? Will you fill one out, please? Okay. Can you make sure that she gets one? There's one right here. Okay. Is there other persons who wish to speak? I see a hand right here. Go right ahead. Can I get a judgment on how many other persons would like to speak on this topic of the official plan? Because I am going to call a recess, so I'm just thinking when, if there's nothing further, go right ahead.
I've talked a few times, but I'm Alan Riddle.
No problem.
I live in Creemore, and I have submitted written questions, which I now understand why I haven't got the answers to, so I appreciate it. I'm going to reiterate it again, though, just so it's officially on the record. Along with what Matt said, actually, it's the same piece of land. So I asked questions about the old Creemore waste management site, which was on the current plan, official plan. It shows as a closed landfill site, and it's on the draft plan. It's showing as half of it is going residential and half of it's open space. And so I had a concern about that because it's, I know it was going through a process to rehabilitate it, but it still shouldn't be residential ever. As far as I'm concerned, I have no problem with the open space for half of it, but I don't think it should be residential. The intent was, as far as I know, the land is still, it's the Simcoe County Solid Waste Management Facilities currently. When they rehabilitated it, they did not do any rehabilitation underneath the building and the structure that's there, which is what was being proposed as residential. So I just was thinking it's one of those things that if you don't disturb it, it's probably fine. But I wouldn't want to build a house on top of it. And so I just want to reiterate that it should be, as far as I'm concerned, it probably should fall under waste management industrial, or the intent when it's being rehabilitated was for Simcoe County said they were going to make it commercial, hopefully to get it to commercial industrial. At no time was the intent in the rehabilitation was to make it residential. But it's in the same piece of land on Edwards Street, which next door to Matt's. So it's all part of that same parcel that's being discussed where between residential and whether it should stay as industrial or commercial.
Okay. All right. So we've recorded those comments. We appreciate you doing that. You've got a forum. Okay. Are there any other members of the public? This is going to be the second call for anyone to come forward and speak in regards to the official plan review, official plan amendment to the official plan. Does anybody have any comments they'd like to bring forward in regards to the official plan? Okay, I'm going to call that twice then. The twice has now been called. The last call is the third. Any third time, anybody else? Giving an opportunity for people to speak about the official plan. And the third time. All right. There's been no movement from the public, so I'm going to call the public as closed, and I'll look to the committee. Members of the committee, do you have any questions or comments in regards to the official plan review? Looking up and down at our councilors. Yes, Mr. MacArthur.
Yeah, I just want to make one comment to response to Jim Campbell's statements there and whatnot. So Jim, I considered this a shot over the bow. In the Creemore Echo, your committee wrote a letter about something back in December. And at the end it said, however, history has shown we can't rely on government, whether it be federal, provincial, or municipal, to do what's best when it comes to the environment and climate change. So I'm hoping that maybe you can retract that statement in future references, because I think we're being more than accommodating through this official plan procedure to hear all your concerns. Okay, thanks.
Our boys won't get into a fight here, okay? But thank you so much for that. Come on up, Jim. I'm being generous. I was thinking about having a recess, but maybe we're not.
I like to apologize for that comment. That article went out without review. And I agree with you when I read the same thing, because I think all of us are very aware of the great steps Clearview has taken to date and the initiative to move forward. And that's what we're looking forward to. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. Members of council, is there any further questions you have to the OP review? Nothing? Going once? Going twice? Before I close it, I'll just acknowledge the work of GSP. Well done, guys. Thank you for that. And I know that you have a lot of material to continue to review. So I know that we are looking forward to your final report that'll be then brought through Amy as our director. And then the public will have an opportunity to see it once it gets published online. And so at this time, I will close this public meeting in regards to the official plan review. And looking at my script, I don't think there's anything special I have to say, other than this concludes the public meeting with respect to item 3.2 of the no, that's the other one. 3.1, the other page. I tell you right now, I'm gonna read all this stuff. Concludes the public meeting with respect to 3.1 Township Official Plan Review Update. We want to thank all that attended and provided comments in the interest of the matter. All input received regarding the proposal will be fully considered by staff in their recommendation, and council and their decision will respect to the application. Report regarding the proposal will be prepared for council, who will be making a decision concerning this matter at a future meeting. So that closes this meeting, this portion. And so I will call for a recess. We will return at exactly 10 minutes to 8. Is that comfortable?
It's
So-
7:36.
Sorry, is that okay?
It's-
7,
It's 7:36, so
Oh.
10 minutes late, that you're giving us a lot of time.
okay, make it 5 minutes. Thank you. If you can leave the live stream up, we'll just turn off the mics.
Thank you very much. Hold on.
Somebody had to do it. Had to be.
All right, we're going to try to get started here in a second. Just giving last minute. Okay, we've got another counselor to join us, but nevertheless, we will commence and pick up the rest of the meeting. We're going to move on in our agenda. We're still on item 3, but it's now 3.2. Is that right? 3.12? Okay, 3.2. All right, we're going to commence with the second public meeting for the evening. And the second public meeting is forms part of the public engagement process for a request made to the Township of Clearview for a community infrastructure and housing accelerator order through the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. The minister's order is legislated under Section 34.1 of the Planning Act. And before requesting an order from the minister, a municipality is responsible for providing public notice and undertaking consultation in a manner that the municipality considers appropriate. This public meeting forms part of the township's consultation efforts for this specific request. So we have the planning staff here. We'll now start a brief presentation concerning this application. I believe, Amy, you're going to lead that off. Amy is our Director of Planning, so thank you very much. Carry on.
Thank you, Your Worship, and good evening, council, staff, and members of the public. I am here tonight to present the township staff component of the public meeting presentation. So tonight we have a public meeting on a CHIA order request 2023-068-ZB. So for council's information and for the information of the public, a CHIA, or Community Infrastructure and Housing Accelerator Order, is a new type of minister's zoning order that is legislated under Section 34.1 of the Planning Act. And this public meeting is part of the local process to facilitate consideration of this tool. So right off the bat, I'm going to give you my contact information so everybody knows who I am. I'm Amy Can. I'm the Director of Planning and Building here at the Township. You know how to reach me by telephone or by email. Okay, so the subject lands are shown here on a key map. The lands are comprised of 3 separate parcels located between 3031 and 3334 side roads in the former Nottawasaga Township. You can see the municipal and legal descriptions on the slide there. So the purpose of the proposed Community Infrastructure and Housing Accelerator Order, or CHIO, as we are calling it, is to amend the zoning to applying to the lands to permit a greater range of employment uses on the subject lands, being the Clearview Aviation Business Park. The proposed site-specific general industrial zone reflects an expanded range of permitted uses while continuing to carry forward all the previously approved site-specific zone standards, such as side yard setbacks, height restrictions, lot coverage, and parking regulations. The existing MDS overlay on the subject property would remain and is reflected in the proposed CHIA. So moving on to the effect of the application. The effect of the application is to enable the development of a broader range of employment uses, including non-aviation uses, while maintaining the existing aviation permissions currently permitted on the existing approved Clearview Aviation Business Park. So moving on to outline the items that were submitted as part of a complete application. So as per the direction of council, we've generally treated this CHIA application in accordance with how we would treat an official plan or zoning bylaw amendment, sort of in accordance with what the Planning Act stipulates for those types of applications, so that we could have some certainty and transparency in how we were treating the application. So we did require sort of a completeness element, which included sort of an application, which came in the form of an request letter, because we don't have an application form for a CHIA, and also required fees were submitted. Planning justification report was submitted by the planning consultant from MHBC Planning. He is here tonight as well for your questions later. The draft CHIA order was also submitted. So basically it looks like a draft zoning bylaw amendment was also submitted by MHBC. And finally, an employment impact assessment was submitted as requested by the township. So all of those items can and have been available online since notice was given. And that's also a link for everybody's interest and convenience. So for the benefit of council, the new council, as the case may be, and also public, I have outlined the existing approvals that apply to these properties that essentially took the lands out of an agricultural designation and zoning category and placed them into an aviation-related categories in terms of the official plan and zoning bylaw amendments. Those happened in 2015 and 2017. And then in 2016, we saw the subdivision of the 3 parcels to facilitate the business park use that is in draft plan and continues to exist and apply to the properties. Okay, next slide, please. Great. So this is an ortho photo. Again, showing the subject lands for your interest. We have agricultural uses surrounding the lands from the north, east, and south. And to the west, we have the Collingwood Regional Airport, or CNY3. The current land use applying to the lands today, the lands are still in crop and pasture land. There are some livestock facilities included, as well as agricultural outbuildings, and there is still a single detached dwelling on one of the parcels. We'll go back one, please. Thank you. So the planning policy applying to the lands, of course, as noted, the official plan designation, airport related employment land, zoning bylaw applying to the lands are airport industrial exceptions 2, 3, and 4, stormwater management facility, and there are holding provisions applying to the lands as well. So as far as notice and circulation, the original public meeting for this CHIA was scheduled on December 13th, but as you'll recall, had to be rescheduled due to inclement weather. A courtesy notice for tonight's meeting was given on December 19th. So we re-notified of tonight's meeting just so that you're aware. And finally, to the last slide here, the review process, just outlining where we've been. Application received and deemed complete in late November. Notice of that original public meeting was given again in late November with the re-notification of tonight's public meeting on January 17th. We do anticipate doing a more intensive review and working on a recommendation report to bring forward to council in accordance with the direction from the province as to how to treat a CHIA order request from an applicant. This is a relatively new tool, so we do have to work with the guidance provided by the province, but we do plan on doing that and bringing forward something for council's consideration likely in February. Happy to answer any questions or happy to pass it on to MHBC.
All right. I'm sure you'll be available to answer any questions from committee or from the public. So thank you very much for your presentation. So I believe the applicant is here. Does the applicant or the agent wish to provide a brief presentation? Hello, Corey. Corey, nice to see you again. And sorry to keep you waiting. It's been a wonderful evening so far. So I'll give you the floor.
Yeah. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council, township staff, and members of the public that are still in attendance this evening. Certainly learned a lot about your exciting new official plan leading up to this. So I also have a presentation prepared. I'd like to thank staff for their presentation. There is a bit of overlap, so I'll try to skip forward in a few spots just to not to be too repetitive. And then as staff mentioned, I'm here to answer any questions members of council or the public may have. If there's anything I can't answer this evening, I'm certainly happy to take that back and with our consultant team and ownership group, respond formally in writing back to the township. So there's something on the record. I will just note Ramo Nisfero from the ownership group would have liked to be here this evening. He was planning on attending back in December. Unfortunately, with the change in date, he did have a scheduling conflict, but I think he reached out ahead of the meeting, and he's also happy to answer any questions at another time. So by brief introduction, my name is Corey Chisholm. I'm a partner with MHBC Planning out of our office in Barrie, and we're the planning consultants on behalf of the proposed GEO order. And we also did do the previous planning applications that Ms. Can walked council and public through earlier. So again, here's the location map. Only difference is this is the satellite image, and you can see directly to the west is the existing airport. Next slide. So as mentioned, the subject property is comprised of 3 separate parcels. It totals approximately 265 acres, so quite a large piece. And there is various existing approvals from the county and township official plans to the existing zoning, right down to the existing draft plan approvals for a business park style subdivision. Next slide, please. So here's the 2 existing approved draft plans. It's a funky shape, so we had to kind of chop it in half to get them on the screen. But on the left-hand side, the bottom right corner would connect with the top left corner of the image on the right-hand side. Through this proposed GEO order, there's no changes proposed to the existing approved draft plan or those existing draft plan conditions. Next slide, please. So as Ms. Can explained, the proposed GEO is really to permit a broader range of employment uses on the site to try to bring in a wider range of end users and get the development moved forward to help bring new economic development and jobs to the community. The existing approval, all of the permitted uses are tied to being airport or aviation related with that adjacency to the airport. Since the time of the approvals, there's been changes within the aviation industry as well as the ownership of the adjacent airport. And that vision hasn't been able to come to fruition. However, with a broader range of employment uses being permitted, there's certainly a lot of interest out there, especially for large format end users to come into a site that's this large. As mentioned, those aviation related uses would not be removed. So certainly as things progress, if there are uses that have synergies with the airport or are aviation related, those would certainly still be allowed to continue to be permitted. The next slide, please. Just to clarify, all other existing site-specific zone standards are proposed to carry forward unchanged. So when we're talking about maximum height, setbacks, lot coverage, MDS requirements, those would all stay as are currently approved. The height's a very important one as we are adjacent to an airport. So there was a lot of study done at the time of the original approvals to identify what is the maximum permitted height as it relates to the adjacent airport. And there was a study that was done that led to kind of how the existing site-specific zoning is set up. So there's kind of bands on the zone map, and there's varying levels of maximum permitted height as we get further away from the airport. So at the time of the original approval, that was reviewed and determined to be consistent with the federal requirements around the airport. And through this process, we're not proposing to change any of that. Next slide, please. So this slide identifies the existing permitted uses on the property. Just to highlight a couple, you can see we have aeronautical, manufacturing, processing, repairing, fabricating uses. We also have airport-related warehouse, airport-related light equipment sales and rental, airport-related research, office. So a lot of different industrial commercial type uses with that airport related kind of fixed to it. So just to kind of put it in context, as it stands today, a large manufacturer could come in that makes computers or tires or parts for airplanes, but they would not be able to make those parts for tractors or for cars. And what we're looking to do is expand that range of permitted uses so we could have a much wider range of potential end users attracted to the site and the community. Next slide, please. So this is the range of proposed expanded permitted uses. So the ones in the top left are those existing ones. So there's certain ones, aircraft hangar, you don't really have hangars for other types of uses. So we're keeping that the same. For example, the third one down where it just says manufacturing. So that's where it's the existing use with that airport related removed from it. And then the ones in bold are taken from the township's general industrial zone. So those are all the uses that are permitted as of right in the general industrial zone across the township. And through this process, we are proposing to change the zoning from airport industrial over to the general industrial zone, which is where those other uses come into play. Next slide. So as Ms. Can alluded to, at the time of the original approvals, there was a full suite of technical studies that were completed, various engineering, environmental, archaeological reports. Through this process with the change in permitted uses, we submitted an additional planning justification report, and we did have a land economist undertake an employment area impact assessment as was requested by the municipality. Through that study, they did note that this is a unique site within the township, and certainly there isn't an area in the township currently that could attract large format end users such as the site. It also identified, in comparison to other municipalities in the county, that there's currently a very large outflow of workers. So a lot of people that live in Clearview but drive to other municipalities to work. And obviously, having a large employment site such as this in Clearview would help kind of round out the planning vision of providing a complete community and work towards some of those sustainability goals where residents don't need to travel as far to get to places of work. Next slide. So in brief, as Ms. Can alluded to, the CHIO is quite a new tool from the province. They have been using it in the last year or so. There's a number that have been approved in Simcoe County. It's essentially an accelerated process to make changes to zoning. And really they look to implement this where there's clear provincial priorities that they would like to kind of cut through red tape and speed up the process. So that can be related to employment and economic development. It can also be related to housing. So in this case, with it being an industrial site, we're looking at it from the employment and economic development side. Really what it's allowing us to do is to undertake the zone change that's proposed without having to amend the County Simcoe's official plan and the township's official plan. If we were required to go through those processes, it would likely be an additional 1 to 2 years to get to the point where we could change the zoning. So with it being an identified provincial priority, we thought it qualified to come forward under this new provincial tool. Next slide. So as mentioned, the form of the order, we did provide a draft order. It essentially looks like a zoning bylaw amendment as would be normally submitted, and one was provided with the application. As mentioned, the big change is going from airport industrial to general industrial, and all the other existing site-specific provisions are maintained. Next slide. So this is a copy of the zone map that was appended to the order. I'll just note the ones with the polka dots kind of surrounding the site. Those are it's the stormwater management and those aren't proposed to change. Those are the stormwater management blocks on the current approved draft plan. And where you can see the bands along the west side, close to the airport, that's where there's varying height permissions. And again, we aren't proposing to make any changes to that. This is another requirement that we had to incorporate back to the time of the original approvals, and that was to include some minimum distance separation provisions within. So this is in the existing zoning, again, not proposed to change, but there are a few existing agricultural facilities where some of those MDS radiuses come onto our site. So within those areas, there are some additional requirements for any uses that would be proposed in the future. Next slide. So in regards to consultation and engagement, we have had ongoing discussions with township staff throughout this process. We did come in and have a formal pre-consultation meeting back in June of last year. And then actually to initiate this process, my colleague, who has since retired, came before council to make a delegation requesting permission to proceed with the process. Council didn't make a decision that day, but they just allowed us to make the application and then get back in front of you here for a public meeting. As far as applications that would still be required, so if we are successful with obtaining the CHIO order, in order for development to proceed on the site, the ownership group would still need to progress through detailed engineering design to clear those existing draft plan conditions and ultimately register the draft plans. And then specific end users in the future, as they come forward on different blocks, they would need to go through the typical site plan control process with the township. So depending on the nature and size of certain uses, additional studies would likely be required, and it would go undertake additional review. And then ultimately, they would also need to get their building permits. So I think that's everything for my presentation, but certainly happy to answer any questions from members of council or the public.
All right, thank you very much, Corey. I will ask you one quick question. The clerk and I were just talking, and we will get to public, but I do have this. You did mention in your presentation that there have been other CHIO applications across Simcoe County. Unfortunately, we're not aware of them. Maybe off the top of your head, do you have any that you could mention to us?
Yeah, so there was,
we would like to know.
There was one approved in the township of Tay.
Okay.
That was a redevelopment of a school site that had closed down. I didn't work on it, but our firm did take that one on. And a few months ago, City of Barrie Council did send off support to the province for one. I'm not sure if the province has made a decision on that one, but that one was, went through the similar process as well.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that quick update. Appreciate that. All right. So thank you very much, Corey. I'm sure you'll be available for questions and answers if necessary. So at this point, I can ask from the public. Does anyone in the audience wish to make a comment, ask a question, or address the committee with respect to this application? Questions may be directed to or responded to by the applicant, their agent, or staff, and it should be addressed through the chair, which is me. Please remember to complete and submit your delegation form. I think they're still over here. Yep, Krista's still got them there. And so I'll do that, of course, 3 times. Going once. Yes, Matt, come forward to the microphone. Thank you. And by the way, you do have to fill out a separate form, even though you're on each meeting. Okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'm just reading, it interested me because of the industrial development. I just wanted to understand the proposed use of the CIHA order. What specific limitations in the regular planning process are prompting the consideration of this order for the project?
I'll ask the applicant to answer what's the critical nature of that, and then I can ask the staff to supplement that. Corey?
Certainly, and it's a great question. The current provincial government certainly has been looking at some different tools to try to speed up the planning process in general, to try to deliver, and I think a couple of priorities they've identified is housing, jobs, and long-term care beds. So at the earlier part of their term, you might have heard of ministerial zoning orders. That was a tool the provincial government was using to fast track development approvals for those provincial priorities. They did start to receive some criticism on how that process played out. And from my perspective, they took that and kind of came out with this revamped tool, being the CHIO order, which is a more transparent and public tool. So again, there's a requirement to come before municipal council and members of the public to have a public meeting, receive feedback, this very same way we would do if we had to do a normal zoning bylaw amendment. In this case, as I alluded to in my presentation, if we're not able to proceed with the CHIO process, our client would have to go through a Simcoe County official plan amendment, which is through the county, and then that goes up to the province for approval. And then we would have to do a township of Clearview official plan amendment, which would get approved by township council, and then it gets kicked up to Simcoe County for review and approval before we could do our zoning. So there's a lot of layers of planning approval process, and that adds a significant amount of time and cost to the process, which is why our client chose to pursue the CHIO route.
All right. Amy, do you have any comments about how this process is perhaps a little bit different and how it meets what Matt's suggesting as it being critical?
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't think I have anything to add to what Mr. Chisholm has noted. As I noted in my presentation, council originally directed us in this context to proceed sort of procedurally as though it was an official plan or zoning bylaw amendment. So that because of that, we are sort of honoring that public consultation process for the purpose of exploring the CHIO tool.
Okay, thank you very much. Anything further, Matt?
I just thought it was kind of ironic that we're sidestepping the planning process to exempt them from the official plan when the previous meeting was for the official plan. Do we know, does the airport want this to happen? Like, is it related to the airport, or it just happens to be neighbors?
I believe the airport owner is here, and I suspect they'll probably be speaking in a minute. He's
Okay.
got his yellow form already.
I guess my other question, like some of the things that they're asking for, it didn't make sense to me why they'd want to have a sawmill. You know, if they're looking for large format industrial users, you know, sawmills are dusty places, and it didn't seem like a good thing to have at an airport. Are there any guarantees the development would go quickly? I mean, if they're looking to rush this, are they looking to break ground, and are they going to do something to back that up and say that it'll happen fast? Because it's been, what, 6 or 7 years, and I'm not very familiar with the specifics, but if nothing's happened yet, was there a reason for that delay?
I'll let the applicant try to answer that. I kind of wish the owner of the project was here, but perhaps you can answer that, Corey, if you know any knowledge of that.
I think certainly the ownership group would be happy to provide more detail on that when they get a chance. The existing approvals, as mentioned, the permitted uses are tied to being airport related. At the time of those approvals, the adjacent airport was a publicly owned facility. Since that time, it did change. I'm not sure exactly which year that occurred in, but it's now privately owned. Additionally, large users that would fall under the airport related permitted uses weren't able to be successfully attracted to warrant moving forward with the expense of going through detailed design, coming up with the communal servicing solution, and moving forward. So the objective here is to expand the range of permitted employment uses to be able to attract a much wider range of end users. In speaking with our client, I think their plan would be, if we're successful with this proposed tool, they've certainly had discussions with potential end users, would be to advance detailed engineering design, work towards clearing the draft plan conditions throughout 2024 with the objective to break ground with pre-servicing in the following year.
Okay. There's a comment about timeliness.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you comfortable with that? If you want, I'll allow you to speak in a moment if you want to speak again. How's that? Fair enough. Is there other persons who wish to speak? Jordy, please come right forward.
Your Worshiping Council, my name is Jordy Dalgleish. I'm the president of the Collingwood Regional Airport, and I'm here tonight to answer some of your questions. Our planner has written a letter on behalf of the airport to address request by Clearview Aviation Business Park, which borders our airport. I have extra copies of the letter here tonight. If you don't have one, then I'd be pleased to give you one. Just let me know. We're supportive in principle for expanding the range of uses for lands adjacent to the airport, as long as they do not adversely affect the airport. Our discomfort with this application lies with the lack of due process, which would normally require an official plan amendment in addition to a zoning bylaw amendment. These normal processes would give all of us comfort that an increase in permitted uses would not harm the airport and would not be giving an unfair business advantage to other lands zoned aviation industrial and which are intended to actually support the airport. Due process would allow all parties to follow the rules outlined in the township's official plan without resorting to a fast track through a housing accelerator. The airport and Clearview Aviation Business Park currently have the same zoning and similar permitted uses. Would it not make sense to keep them the same? So the long and the short of it is this. I've been told that this is a foregone conclusion. And if that's the case, should you decide to vote in favor of this application, the airport asks that at the very least you level the playing field and require the accelerator application to include airport lands and those which are currently zoned the same. I'm open for any questions you want. I have a good understanding of the history of the airport. I've been there for about 14 years. I went through the sale. I went through the Clearview Aviation Business Park. To this date, there's been no comprehensive negotiation to try and access airport lands by the Clearview Aviation Business Park. Are there any questions?
I'm just writing down what you said. You said there's been no comprehensive deal. No comprehend. Okay. All right.
No, for access.
For access.
Yeah, they have made an offer on the airport previously,
Okay.
but it was rejected.
Fair enough. All right, Jordy, just stand right there for a second. Are there any other members who wish to speak? I don't know you gentlemen, so I wasn't sure. So, okay, so would you like to speak? Usually the procedure is to let everybody speak and then we'll ask questions from the council. So you're okay? Stand by then? All right. You're all right? Okay, good. Jordy.
Lastly, as an example
Sorry.
of the need for due process, I noticed on the list of permitted uses, there were several that were problematic for airport operations, one of which was broadcasting.
Yeah.
You know, obviously we use radios to bring planes in and things like that. So I would ask council to please consider this very carefully and slowly and through the correct process.
All right, thank you. Okay, so do you have any questions for us then and beyond your statements? Just, again, I'm trying to maintain the procedure because we have to be correct.
That's right. Well, I know you've all been through a long meeting, so I'll leave it at that. And thank you. I think if anyone wants to reach out to me, I'd be happy to answer further questions. And I'm sure I'll have more questions as things go along. We were only made aware of this in November, and we really haven't had time to analyze the true effects of what this means.
Okay. All right. Before you go, and I know you want to sit down, but I appreciate that. Amy, can you just outline, and perhaps Corey, again, this tool has been applied as a result of direction from the province of Ontario, opening up an opportunity for supplemental planning tools. And so, Amy, could you just outline, this is new to us. This is the first one that this township has dealt with. And it was news to find out about the other ones just tonight. But Amy, we're following the procedures the best we can, given that we are new to this. Is that correct? Can you outline that for me?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So indeed, we are proceeding through the guidelines that the province has provided for use of the CHIA. And council will be tasked to make a decision as to whether or not it wants to engage in the order process or not. And so we certainly here at Clearview have never been through this before. Our approach to the process is genuine, and we are very interested in hearing from the public and our consulting agencies, et cetera, as we are with other typical Planning Act applications. So we're still in the exploratory stage here, and a recommendation report will come forward later on, which will investigate, the options that council has in its hands.
So I'd like to just address, Mr. Dalglish, your comment about lack of process and due process on this application. These are tools that are applied from the province of Ontario. They're not our tools. They're applied, and we have to work with what was given to us as we are subjects of the province of Ontario, right?
That's right.
So you understand that, it's not our choice that a property owner decided to activate a CHIA procedures, but we have to follow it once that comes forward to our table.
Absolutely. But it's my understanding that council can reject this application.
Yes, that's true.
And ask the applicant to go through the process of this town's official plan to achieve what they want. Is that correct?
Amy? Yes, she's nodding her head. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I just wanted to make clear that
Yeah,
that
no,
you
I
called out
understand.
the lack of process, and I want to be clear, this table, this dais, this meeting is in process.
Absolutely.
I
I
appreciate
understand. It's an interesting conundrum for everyone, because I know that a lot of municipalities have pushed back against this and not given it the time of day.
Right.
Especially when it hasn't been housing related, which was really the true intent of the order. Thank you.
Fair enough. Thank you very much for that comment and those questions. Remember, if there's nothing further from the public, I'll call, yes, first, second, and third time. You want to come up again, Matt? Come right ahead. Sure. I know I gave you that opportunity, but I'm looking, come on, you guys.
So my understanding of
Walkers.
that the CIHA order is it's in place until it's revoked by the minister, and it doesn't allow, or it doesn't need to conform with the official plan. But once it's in place, the council has no more oversight over it. Like, kind of like what's happening to me in Creemore, 20 years down the road, if we want to change it because it's not working, can't happen unless the minister revokes it.
Yes, so I'll help the staff out, and that is that as I said a minute ago, we're subject to the province of Ontario. And so we're given the opportunity to make this type of decision and ask for the minister to make a decision on this outside of our authority. Okay. So once the minister makes a decision, we are obligated to follow it. So it's outside of our authority. We're passing the responsibility to make the decision to the minister directly. What it does do, if you are the developer that wants to move forward quickly, it allows the process to be slimmed down and shortened quite a bit, particularly in time, given how fast economies change, to make changes to properties with the ministers approving it so that it doesn't have to go through the lengthy zoning bylaw amendment process. That makes sense?
Yeah.
It's like, you know what it is? I've actually compared it to something. If you lose your passport and you're desperate to get another one, passport office will break every rule to get you a new passport right away. Like that's, they'll push it through because they'll get some supervisor to sign it ahead until they bump it forward till you finally get your passport back. Right. So there's processes in place in government to fast track things, to use a word that Mr. Dowler said, or to go through the process where you in line with everyone else and do the due process features. Right.
So it's up to Clearview to support it, though, to get to make use of that tool.
That's right. So in this case, the normal procedure would be to go through the zoning bylaw application to change the zoning on the lands if that's what you wish to do as a property owner.
Right. So why do we want to rush, or what's the advantage to rushing it? Or as a community, I mean, the official plan is going to bring in a lot more areas for industrial, in Stainer, which would be more central for the township.
Sure, we'll certainly hope that. Yeah.
I guess my point would be something I read online, and it was jobs in the aviation and aerospace sector are on average 42% above the provincial wage. These jobs bring significant spending power into our local businesses and housing market. Would it not make more sense to develop some of the newly designated industrial areas in the official plan so we don't miss out on these high value opportunities?
Yeah.
I'll leave it at
Good
that.
commentary. I appreciate that. To Mr. Dalglish's other comment, and that is that the CHIA was designed to assist with the housing infrastructure. This specific property was approved back in 2017 because of the employment opportunities on that land. It actually prohibits housing in the current zoning right now that's there as a result of it being aviation airside industries, right? There are no residential uses in the air industry at this time, right? So the CHIA format, part of it is, I guess, Corey, being applied because of the employment features, not the housing features. Corey, could you help me with that? Is that correct?
Yes, certainly. So there is a webpage on the ministry website that explains the CHIO process and outlines, where it can be used. And it does specifically talk to both housing and economic development and employment opportunities. So I wouldn't say it's weighted one way or the other. It's there for the identified provincial priorities and try to cut through what the provincial government refers to as red tape. And as mentioned, the CHIO process would allow this proposal to move forward in a much more expedited manner, rather than going through a county official plan amendment, township official plan amendment, and then zoning bylaw amendment. If I can just add, in response to some of the comments heard on the negative impacts or potential negative impacts to the airport. So these were, the land use compatibility was studied at the time of the original approvals, and there were certain things included in the existing zoning to ensure that that land use compatibility is there, and that's certainly proposed to continue. And I spoke to the height and the varying heights. There's also a list of prohibited uses, which is proposed to be maintained in the CHIO order. And it mentions inns, hotels, and motels, residential, again, not wanting that right beside a functioning airport. But it also identifies uses resulting in the production of steam or other exhaust, glare, the attraction of birds, the production of electric signal interference, or any other uses which would negatively impact the long-term operation and economic role of the adjacent airport. So the same approach as before, there was certain uses permitted, but when you get to that site plan control stage, you need to demonstrate that you're not contributing any sort of negative impact to the airport. So same thing here, any use, whether it's airport related or not, that might come forward in the future through site plan approval would need to demonstrate that it's not contributing any sort of negative impact. So that protection is there. I'd also like to point out there's a long list of uses. Again, we're proposing to go to the township's general industrial zone, and that's the standard list that's permitted. If there are individual uses through comments we hear back from the township, we can certainly take that back to the ownership group to see if there's an opportunity to strike some of those, if there's any specific ones that are thought to be inappropriate.
Okay. Thanks, Corey. I'm glad you said that part because that's something I was going to bring up later. I have Jordy, you go ahead, and then I see Jim's raised his hand, so that's good.
Really important. This
Jeez, sure.
key to the whole thing. And it deals with compatibility and the studies we were just told about. So the previous land use compatibility studies were for airport related uses only, and not what's being proposed here tonight. So this is why I'm saying we need to go slowly and look at this properly through the process, because we haven't done new studies to say that these new uses won't affect the airport. Like, there's a very real possibility. Like, we hang on by the skin of our teeth. You tell me that the airport is key infrastructure for this municipality, and I agree with that. We got to keep it going. Let's not rush it. We can succeed both ways. The airport can succeed. This business park can succeed. We don't need to rush it through a housing order. And this council has the ability to say to the Ontario government, no, we want to do our due process. Our due process is not red tape. Our due process was developed because this is where we live. This is what we do here, and we want to do it our way. So that's the final comment I have for you. And I ask you on behalf of the airport, let's do this properly. You have the tools. You're not being pushed by the provincial government. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dalglish. Perfect. Jim, did you want to speak? Please come to the mic. Don't forget to fill out one of those forms. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Mayor. I didn't come, this is very interesting, I got to say, not the reason I came to the meeting, but it's interesting as a resident of Clearview hearing this and questioning the whole thing. Like, and maybe a lot of this is covered, but what it has there through this expedited process has there been traffic studies, like we're talking about in a whole industrial park, basically. The roads, are there load restrictions on these roads? You know, is the township and the taxpayer going to end up having to foot the bill to improve roads to service a business operation here? Water and sewer, I hope that has been considered too, how that is being addressed. And the big picture, it seems to me, it's like the cart before the horse, or that this isn't a coordinated or comprehensive approach, because we have a housing shortage, we have an employee shortage. We're talking about putting in a whole bunch more business that needs employees, where I know some of these, light commercial, industrial places are hurting for finding employees right now, and there's no housing. So it seems to me that the secret, again, I think to Jordy's comment, what's the rush here in this case? Because I don't think the whole picture is really being considered if it's rushed, or I question if it is. Thank you.
All right. Jim, don't go away. I'll just give you one comment back, and that is that the previous work that was done to change the zoning to airside operations or whatever, all the aviation related uses, included all types of traffic study works and so on, which was part of the due diligence as to why the site is where it is today.
Right.
So it already has all of those works done, if I'm not mistaken. Staff, is that correct? I think that work's all done, is it not?
Thank you, Your Worship. The many of the items that have been noted are reflected in the conditions of draft plan approval.
Right.
And because the proposal is for an industrial park, albeit aviation related, there are conditions around, protection of traffic and ensuring that appropriate servicing conditions are arranged.
Right.
So
Private servicing and et cetera. Right.
Great.
Yeah.
That's
good. So see, I think the point is here, and I'm not, speaking one way or the other on this. I'm saying that the tool allows them to make a change by moving it to the minister, and then the minister signs off on it. It comes right back and it's done without a lot of back and forth, And so that's really what the tool is trying to do. In this particular case, it's already an industrial park. So it's already met all of those requirements and had all the NVCA studies, et cetera, right? Which make it adjacent to the regional airport as an asset. So,
right.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anything further? Yes, please come forward, Mr. Walker.
Thanks, Your Worship. So earlier, you're almost looking at us for a comment, and so just today, I am blindsided by the topic because I wasn't here for this topic tonight, but I did eat at the airport for the first time today, and I was really impressed with how the upgrades that there is at the airport and the outlay that's Jordy's made since he's been there, and I can see it. I don't really know Jordy. But I could see, just introduced to him today, and this has nothing to do with tonight's meeting, but that when you comment on what there is here that's proposed and for what Jordy has invested, I would say probably you want to look at an even playing field on his behalf, because he's the one why this is all there. It is Collingwood, the town of Collingwood that had it before, but to take it on, that's a big risk. And I think that there's a lot here to be concerned about and really thought over. So for me, I would sleep on it because I never make a good decision on the first time I realize anything like I have tonight. And I'm sure you guys will make the right decision. So.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. And thank you for contributing. Appreciate hearing from you tonight. For the third time, is there anybody else who wishes to bring forward a comment from the public? Seeing none? Okay, then I'll close the public portion, and I'll look to our members of our committee. Any members of the committee wish to make a question or a comment or a question or a clarification in regards to this whole process? Looking up and down the table. Who wants to go? Marty, you're up first.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't understand this leveling the playing field for the airport. They're federally regulated, are they not? So we have no decision to make there.
Yeah, this decision is not about the federal regulations. It's about the zoning application for that particular site, which is known as the Aviation Business Park. I believe you were recommending that it be leveled so that it was equal to all parties. Jordy, come right ahead.
Thank you. And that's a good question. We are governed federally at the airport. That means we don't necessarily have to adhere to municipal standards. But we've made a conscious effort to do that, despite the fact that we don't need to. We still are zoned by the township. We still do carry zoning, and we endeavor to adhere to that zoning. So you're not going to see us, doing strange things out there at our airport. We're going to stick to what's permitted through your planning department. But it's true. We are federally governed. So what we ask when we say a level playing field is if you're going to allow someone else who's zoned airport industrial, like we are as well, to have dry storage, we would ask for that too. We don't know all the nuances yet, but what it means is how come they get to go and have a airplane tire factory there when we can't where we are, just because they need to run tractor tires and airplane tires at the same time? So what we're saying is, if you're going to increase the value of their property by okaying this zoning order, please do it for us too. The township has zoning standards. Let's make them uniform then. Let's give them what we've got and what they've got to us as well. That's really all I was asking. If it's going to go through, preferably, I'd like to see this done in a measured manner where it goes through the proper channels. We find out, no, this is not going to be impactful on the airport. Then we say from the airport, then do it. But we can't be sure of that the way it's happening now. It's too quick. There's no control. And the township has no say.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beelan. Thank you, Mr. Davish. Mr. MacArthur, is that right? Next.
Yeah, just one question. So you're talking about the federally controlled airport. Is it strictly within the boundaries that you own, or is there kind of staggered conditions outwards from the actual property?
It's strictly within the area that we own. We're governed by the federal government, NAV Canada, and various government departments. If we were to absorb a piece of land through a purchase, that would extend to that as well, from what I understand. But for instance, the Clearview Aviation Business Park does not have, the feds don't govern that.
Right.
Yeah, no, I realize that, but like there's nothing outside your boundaries then.
Nothing.
Okay.
Nothing.
Amy, if you could just, before you go away, Jordy, Amy, could you just clarify then our 2001 document that laid this this layer around the regional airport well prior to Mr. Dalglish's firm owning the airport, that's applied if a landowner wished to activate that aviation usage. Is that correct? It seems to me it's around all the properties that surround the airport.
Your worship, are you referring to the existing official plan designations applying to the airport related business park, or?
So the aviation business park, when they made their application to us back in 2017, they activated a section of our official plan that talked about all of the lands surrounding the regional airport, not just their properties, but all of the lands have a layer attached to them that can be activated if the owners wish to apply to have that changed to include aviation services.
That is a
She's
good
looking at
question,
me a
Your
little
Worship.
questioning. See, Rosalind's nodding her head because Rosalind was here when that happened.
I'm going to turn to my staff who've been here longer than I to see
Roz?
if they can answer.
So the point I'm trying to make here is that to the question that was asked about influence on the airport, you're absolutely correct. Your federal regulation applies to the lands that you own, which is attached to your license, CNY3, right? And that influence applies directly to that. But the municipal influence, which also includes your land, also includes all of the land surrounding the airport, which goes back to 2001 when the official plan first came out here. Because at that time, it was acknowledged, and you said it a minute or a little while ago, that the airport is a critical piece of infrastructure to provide an economic engine for this municipality as well as this whole region. And so that's why CAVP exists, because those particular landowners activated that 2001 tool, which then went through the hearing process, the due process, which created all the studies, which created all the permissions, and council of the day supported it, mainly because I was here too at the time, wasn't the mayor, but I supported it because it's about bringing jobs to our community. Now, here's the best part. Since you purchased that airport, there's been a whole lot more jobs come out of that airport. Like there's more people employed there now, as I understand it, than there's ever been. Like, I don't even know the number, but I know when I was on the board back in whatever, 2010, it was around 20 people worked at the airport. I think it's significantly higher than that. I'm not asking you to tell me that, but I believe that it is. So the point is that all of the lands surrounding the airport do have a layer on them that can be activated if the owners want to go through the zoning bylaw amendment plan. No, for instance, Matt, your property down in Creemore, you don't have that on your land down there. Like there is no aviation business park attached to your land, you see? But over there, all those lands, that layer does exist on top of it. It was approved by the county at Simcoe at the time. And I recall it was quite a discussion at the county because at the time, the county leaders were very focused on Lake Simcoe Regional because at that time, Lake Simcoe Regional was getting a whole lot of attention. And to be fair to Town of Collingwood was also trying to raise the attention of the Collingwood Regional Airport at that time. So that's why that happened. So Clearview Township supported that as a cooperative effort with the Town of Collingwood to put that in place in 2001. It was in the official plan. Fair enough?
That's correct. It might be something you want to review in the official plan at some point, but that's correct. Yeah.
All right. So just want to be clear because the license, the federal license CNY 3, you're absolutely correct. If you wanted to extend it out, you could either enter into an agreement with the property owner on a co-ownership or a long-term 100-year lease, or you could actually purchase the land, make your application to Transport Canada. Transport Canada would make the amendment and change the license of influence to your properties. Much like what's happened out here at Edenvale Aerodrome. They've done the same thing, but your aerodrome influence is specifically on your lands. Yeah. Good. Whew. Thank you. Members of council, is there anything further? Any other questions to staff or the proponents? No? Okay, I'll close that then. And thank you very much, everybody, for participating. And thank you, committee, for bringing this forward. This concludes the public meeting with respect to item 3.2 of the Community Infrastructure Housing Accelerator Order Request number 6633 at the 3334 Side Road North, at 6630 at 3031 Side Road North for this evening agenda. We thank all who attended and provide comments to their interest in this matter. All input received with regard to this proposal will be fully considered by staff in their recommendation and by council in their decision with respect to this application. A report regarding the proposal will be prepared for council, who will make a decision concerning the matter at a future meeting. And there, I will now close all the public meetings for this evening's agenda. And council, I know you're waiting for this. I'll return back to our regular agenda. Looking at our second page of our regular agenda. Let's see. Look at that. We've got the bylaw to confirm our proceedings of the council meeting. All right. Be it resolved that bylaw number 24-09 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the January 17th, 2024 special council meeting be presented and read a first, second, and third time finally passed on the 17th day of January, 2024. Mr. Walker, Mr. Beelan, thank you. Council, you've heard the bylaw. Any questions? Seeing none, I'll call the motion. All in favor. Bylaw carries unanimous. Thank you. Council, we have the motion to adjourn. Once again, here we are. It's just before 9 o'clock. We're wrapping up at the last time in this dais. I think I said it the other night on Monday night, but this is the actual last time. So thank you very much for staff for keeping this organized in here. And we look forward to moving to our new facilities on a temporary basis over at the Stayner Community Center I think it's the north room. Is that right? The north room. That's where we'll be. Council, a motion to adjourn. Time is 8:52. I'll take Councillor Deneen. I'll take Councillor Broderick. And is there any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? And we are adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good evening.
Great. Photograph and hard out one time. Hey, Matt, thanks a lot for coming. You're ready to go? Oh, no,